But here we are.
Here we are.
And Brian, welcome, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me for this entertaining discussion that I know we're going to have tonight. No, this is great, man. Thanks for thinking of me.
Dude, we should have done this like years ago.
I know, but here we are now, so that's all that counts.
Well, it's because you've been blowing out some great videos lately, and it's like, I guess it's time, right?
I guess so. That's the whole thing. It's one of these things that I started to kind of dabble and screw around with it, and it's, as you well know, like you start to do this a little bit and it kind of becomes a bit of an addiction where you're like, okay, what's the next thing I want to try? What's the next thing I want to do? So yeah, it's been a fun series of rabbit holes to chase, and I got a list 6 miles long with more, so it's going to be good.
All right, so before we start talking about drag racing freaks and oddities, something we both geek out over, right? And I've been a part of a few, to say the least, right? For anybody who doesn't know you, who isn't familiar with you,
sure,
bring them up to speed.
Sure. My name is Brian Lohnes. If you may know me from such films as the NHRA on Fox, if you watch NHRA drag racing, obviously I get some YouTube stuff going on now, but drag racing announcer, bankshift.com, just kind of generalized car media guy, if you will, but with a heavy concentration on drag racing and drag racing history, and especially the type of stuff we're going to talk about tonight. Just really love the kind of nooks and crannies of the sport. And, I'm one of those guys. I'm kind of non-denominational when it comes to drag racing. Like, I've been involved in big money bracket racing and radial tire racing and all that type of stuff. So I do have a pretty wide cross section of love for pretty much everything that goes down a racetrack. I get some form of entertainment out of.
You're the most well-rounded person, literally, in the whole world of like stuff that goes fast in a straight line, and then some. Because that Indy 500 thing you did, the twin.
Oh, thank you. Yes,
that was great. That was great. I watched that twice. But just so you guys know, he's not just a pretty face. We were texting back and forth the other day, right? So he texts me a picture. He says, I'm in the middle of doing a ball joint on his kid's car, right? So he's taking me phone to his kid's car, and I clicked him a quick picture on the Jeep. So when we're talking to each other, we're turning wrenches and stuff. So he's definitely the real thing, not just a pretty face.
Well, I appreciate that. No, and I do. I'm a very poor mechanic, but I love being under stuff and screwing around with it. I mean, I have enough mechanical skill to be dangerous, but nothing to the ability that you have and illustrate on every freaking one of your videos, especially with this damn Jeep you're trying to get to run 13. So it's awesome.
Dude, it's the most fun thing. It's crazy, right? Slow stuff is fun. The fast stuff, you know what happens? You have to go there. You have to go to where you just can't go any further, and you're like, there's no fun here.
Right.
And then you have to keep going backwards until you find the fun, and the fun is Jeep.
Yeah, well, look, the lesson is, and we talked about this on the phone the other day, but the lesson is just go out there and do something. Like, don't be, you don't sit around in your house and just cry about the fact that you don't have whatever thing you want. Like, what do you have in front of you, and how can you make that better? And the Jeep's the most epic example of that. My kid's got this late 90s Mercedes with this, got this. It's a funny story. We pushed it home. We pushed it home with my tractor into the house like a year and a half ago, and bought the thing for almost nothing. And he and I have gone front to back on it. It's his first car. We lowered it, but he's got the sticker on the back window. It says 25-second quarter mile club. And but like you said, you got to have fun with what you got. That's what he's doing.
It's not how fast you go; it's how you go fast.
Bingo.
So you did the terrifying Tornado. You did a 3, which is my all-time favorite car. And literally, you picture, the ultimate 1960s expression of drag racing, and it's the terrifying Tornado climbing over the guardrail at Irwindale, right?
Yeah, it's like Shamu going out of the pool. Yeah,
under the concession stand, and a lot of people don't know that the In-N-Out Burger, that chain, the huge chain. In-N-Out Burger was actually the concession stand at Irwindale, and the picture of the terrifying Tornado climbing over the guardrail is in front of the original In-N-Out Burger.
Yeah, Harry Snyder. Harry Snyder was slinging those In-N-Out burgers there as the most legendary thing of all time. And yeah, John Smizer tried to put an end to his concessionaire ability at the racetrack.
They call it the double-double, right?
The double-double, yeah.
Could it be from the terrifying Tornado?
It might have been. That's actually a great question. I don't know what year they started talking about that, but if the damn thing almost ran over his concession stand, it may have actually named the burger. But no, it's this car is this 1966 Olds Toronado that this guy John Smizer builds. He takes a Olds 425 in the front, runs it on like a 30% load of nitro, attaches it to a turbo hydromatic 425, that transmission they developed so they could put these big motors longitudinally in these front wheel drive cars. And then he puts another one of these engines where the back seat would be, but instead of using another transmission, he connects it to a direct drive setup with a 2-disc clutch. So the two engines are never spinning at the same rate to a degree at any one moment. And then secondly, the rear axle is geared at 390, and the front axle, because nobody had made parts for that thing yet, it still had like a 307 gear ratio in it. And nobody made any sort of a limited slip. So if you watch the third installment, you'll see a run where the car goes darting back and forth. And it's because it's an open differential, and it will smoke the right tire, and then it grabs and it smokes the left tire. It's crazy.
Well, if you ever see the pictures of the Hurst Harry Olds, which had the same front transaxle setup, there's a picture of it half hooked up, and it's towing like this.
Yes.
Can you imagine how much torque has to be applied to that thing to like tow it in like that, and what it took to drive it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Schubeck had the same amount of luck basically as Smizer did. I mean, Smizer's crashes were probably more spectacular in their execution, but I think Joe Schubeck wrecked that thing a couple of times as well.
Kathy's trying to get a picture of the car on here now. So we're having tonight's technical difficulty night. So she's trying to post.
We got it going over the guardrail. We got the good stuff here.
Oh, you do? If you can post that up.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at it right now. I'm looking at it on our screen.
You've got it on this. Okay, wait.
God.
Oh, jeez.
You can scroll.
Okay, we're having all kinds of issues here. So how do I get an individual picture to pop up? All right, guys, Google. All right, what did you do? Exit full screen. Okay, get that down.
Okay, hold on.
Here, just close that window. Okay.
I got it.
Yeah, guys, Google terrifying tornado. Yeah. Even better than that, go back and watch his videos, 3 parts, which you pissed me off with the first one.
I think I pissed a lot of people off with their first one, but I had to get John Smizer's name out of the gutter, man. I had to give this guy a chance to be redeemed.
I get you. But I watched that whole thing waiting for, okay, come on, give me some of the tornado, right? And there was nothing there. But you more than made up for it with the second. But so let's go back and talk about that car, okay?
Yeah.
Because the two things, they had problems with the front motor.
Yeah.
So you notice all the twin engine cars of the day always had an issue, and it was usually with the front engine. So Gene Adams' Double Eagle, which I actually talked with him in depth about that one.
Really? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Because I was going to try to duplicate that.
Okay.
All right. This was back in, I guess around 1990, 1991. I wanted to try it in an altered.
Okay.
Okay, 2 injected Chryslers in the altered. So I picked Gene's brain on that. You had Junior Brogdon's car, the Phony Pony.
Oh, the Phony Pony. Yeah.
Same thing. It went faster with 1 engine than it did with 2. And then you used to split the front block in half. And then you had the deal with the terrifying Tornado, where it was always a front engine that was right. So the 2 things that I noticed right away about that car that I wasn't really aware of until I watched the video is that it's got 30% motor, which right away means it's just a super angry, super lean alcohol motor.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the first problem. So guys who are watching this that aren't familiar with this type of thing, right? Up to around 10% nitro. It excites an alcohol motor, and then between like 10 and 20%, it becomes very ragged, and then like 20% to 70% is like this dead zone where you can't tune it as either an alcohol or a nitro motor, so it's just always at war with itself. So he was running at 30%, which is like bad place to be, but also the shower head nozzles.
Yes.
Okay, so there was no distribution there, just a pair of shower heads, just blasted like lethal things, and the transmission, which would change the load on the front motor. See, the back motor is hooked up solid, right?
Yeah, with that twin disc clutch, it's going to be much more evenly loaded as the thing tries to get itself down the racetrack versus the thing going through a series of RPM changes.
Exactly. So every time that thing hit a gear change, it rattled and it would throw the belt or do whatever it was going to do. But they didn't know. Nobody understood the load-sensitive nature of nitro until 1984 before 1985 or so, and that was Dale Armstrong.
Sure.
And that was those Haze. But until then, people had a completely different perception of how nitromethane worked.
Yeah, and it's funny too. You look back at all the estimations of power back in those days are hilarious. They're saying, oh well, this is these things are going to make 1,200 horsepower a piece. It's like, come on. You look at an Oldsmobile 425 now on 100% load, it's not making 1,200 horsepower, let alone 30% on. And you have to think too, after so many explosions, that 30% probably very rapidly became 10 or just he probably just dipped enough in there to say that it had nitro in it. You know what I mean? I mean, a guy like him probably was just so over it by the end, just whatever. Yeah, it's got fuel in it. Yeah.
The thing that fascinated me the most about that is that you found that the car may still actually exist.
Yeah. So long story short, if you watch the third episode, and to Tony's point, if you're a casual Olds Toronado drag racing fan, just go to episodes 2 and 3 because that's the build of the car and then the ultimate problems the guy had with it. Episode 1 is really the backstory and the guy who built it. But long story short, the published history of the car was written by this guy Chris Martin, who was an eminently entertaining man, a total lunatic. Weirdo, a guy that consumed things that people didn't even know existed on this planet.
Chris Martin blacklisted me from the National Hot Rod Association.
That's an incredible feat.
He literally blacklisted me. I was like persona non grata at any NHRA event or having anything to do with the NHRA. This was because I was a street racer. So this was back in, I guess, like 87, 82.
That's crazy.
Yeah. He didn't like me.
So Chris was like this notorious kind of party animal, crazy person. Anyway, he wrote a story years ago that is like, up until this point, was kind of considered the history of the car. And basically he said it crashed the first time he brought it out, which wasn't true. It was a year later. And then he said he crashed at the Winter Nationals in 67. The car was destroyed and that was it. So as I was doing this research, I come across the story that John Smizer himself wrote. And John Smizer in his story from 1968 says, well, I took the car back to my shop and I cut it into pieces so no one would ever race it again.
No, I read that. I actually have a copy of that someplace here.
Yeah, in Drag Racing Magazine.
Yeah.
So then I'm continuing to do my research, and all of a sudden I find from November 20th, 1969, a single classified ad in the Salt Lake Tribune that says, for sale, best offer, complete terrifying Toronado, complete car, spare parts, trailer. I'm like, holy smoke. And then you go the next mile, and the car, according to John Smizer's daughter, the car still is intact somewhere in the Ogden, Utah area, sitting in a trailer with all that stuff.
All right. We need to find this car.
We got to find it. I got a couple guys out there trying to like poke around a little bit and see what they could find, but we got to find it.
And get it running.
Oh, absolutely.
I will drop anything and everything I'm doing in my universe and go to and do whatever it takes to get that car. And I think you would do pretty much the same thing, yeah?
Yes, I wouldn't sit inside it, but I would. I want to see it run and move, and I will watch it from a safe distance away. But I want to see it exist again. I want to see it make noise.
I would give both my nuts to drive it. Both of them gone. See ya. One run in the terrifying Toronado.
You might not have to give them up. You might be taken. Yeah.
The thing is, you had those two cars, but they were as different. Okay, so you had the Terrifying Tornado, and at the same time, you had the Hearst Harry Olds.
Yeah.
And they were really as different as night and day. Like the Hearst Harry Olds was, I don't know for you guys that aren't familiar, right? It was the same situation as the Terrifying Tornado. Two blown fuel 425 Oldsmobiles. The Hearst car had a transaxle in the back also.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
But that was a true race car. That was a true chassis, like a funny car. It was just wearing a cutlass skin.
Yes. Yeah, it was like a Logie style, like what we would call probably a Logie style chassis underneath the Cutlass body. Yeah. So it had all the elements, in theory, it had all the elements to be successful. And, there's these crazy stories about Joe Schubeck having to jump out of the thing at like 70 miles an hour when it's on fire, and it goes off the end of the cornfield and they can't find the car, and then the cornfield's on fire. So they follow the smoke and the flames. And there's video of it wrecking at, I believe it's New York International Drag Strip or Niagara. It crashes into a steel cable and it just tears the thing to pieces. I mean, but like you said, and anytime you see the terrifying Tornado, or anytime you see the Hearst Harriolds and you see it smoking the tires, that's basically on the burnout, because both of the cars would do burnouts with the front wheels only, and then they back up and fire the second engine, which I think the Tornado would, rather the Hearst car, I think on occasion would smoke all four for a little bit of a distance, but undrivable. And the modern equivalent to this, to those of you guys that, if you ever watch truck pulling, if you're into pulling trucks, guys that have real high horsepower Duramax GM trucks that go like pulling like the street tire classes, you'll watch them. They'll completely blow the front ends out of them, and they go into this crazy, crummy, weird canter situation, and then every once in a while the thing will just absolutely fold up. So it's the only modern thing that's even close to what either of those cars did.
But as different as they were, the terrifying Tornado was really a street car. It had a whole interior. It had the full stock interior. They had the back seat still in it. We had the motor and the back seat and the Hearst, but neither of them would work. No. It's just an unworkable.
And the Hearst, they tried twice, right? Didn't the first one get destroyed, and then they rebuilt it into a version 2.0? And I think that one. The coolest part of that car, to a degree, was Schubeck had a aluminized fire suit that looked like a tuxedo. It was freaking awesome. Yeah. But
that was the thing with the early funny car days. And people today, okay, so you say funny car, and people just think, who the hell is even out there anymore, bro? It's been 25 years. I have no idea. I don't know what they look like, what they do. I'm lost, right? Like I was never in it. It's crazy, right? But you go to the early days of funny car, 65, 64, really, 65, 66, up to around 68. It was as much a freak show, as much as a sideshow as anything else. Now, people didn't really care how fast they went as long as they were weird.
Yes,
and
absolutely. Yeah, and you look back, to your point, 68 is when things really kind of hit a normalization of, okay, it's going to be a flip top body. Okay, it's going to look like a performance production car. But like, you go back to Sheldon Kahnblatt's car. It's called Peanut. It's a Ford LTD. This thing was the most enormous, but it was a 1-to-1 scale. They rented a Ford LTD and pulled a mold out.
No. That was actually a model that Ford had made. It was a full-size replica, fiberglass replica.
Oh, get out of here.
Listen, Ford made that body because they did a TV commercial, where they had a helicopter lift the car and put it on top of a hill, or a mountain rather. So after they were done with the model, that's when Sheldon Kahnblatt made the Peanuts car. So he took this full-size 4-door factory-built
LTD
and made a funny car out of it. And then he crashed that car and then built the Snoopy
car. That was an XKE, Jag.
That was an XKE, and that's the car he got killed in.
Yeah.
At Lions.
And listen, that unfortunately, and when we talk about this era and we talk about these freaks and weird cars, there's an element of that's what he was dismembered in, and that's the one that killed him. Unfortunately, the stories tend to narrow into a typical end here, and it's not always the most the most pleasant. But the Jeep funny cars. The Jeep funny cars to me, Secret Weapon, unbelievable, Holy Toledo. You look back at those things. I think those Jeep funny cars were the freaking coolest.
There was a guy named Dr. Wacko.
With the
do you remember?
He went around with Camp Stanley and those guys.
The Wild Bunch.
The Wild Bunch, yes.
The Wild Bunch. That was like middle 1980s. And that was so the destroyer, Gene Conway's car, and the Secret Weapon, were both long wheelbase. They were like really traditional funny cars. It was standard funny cars, like a Logie chassis funny car on that 120-inch long wheelbase. But Dr. Wacko's car, and I don't remember his real name, was a stock wheelbase Jeep with a blown small block Chevy in it. And this thing was crazy. And it was on alcohol, but it was as nutty as any fuel altered out there, because it had this super high center of gravity, really short wheelbase, and you could watch him steering that thing all the way down the track.
The Wild Bunch, we talk about the kind of modern version of the freaks and weirdos. The modern bunch, Camp Stanley got a body in white and from Ford. It was a Ford Taurus station wagon back in
Yeah.
'86 when the Ford Taurus came out. My parents bought one. I was 6 years old. They bought a brand new Taurus, and these things were like, they didn't look like anything else on the road. They, had a bunch of different features and design stuff that was crazy. And he actually got Ford to sell him a body in white for like $1. And I was probably 7 or 8 years old. One of my first times I can vividly remember being at New England Dragway. We were up there to watch the Wild Bunch, whatever was going on that night. And a freaking Ford Taurus station wagon with I think it had a blown Ford Big Block on alcohol comes around the corner, and that was it. Like, it was over for me at that point. It was unbelievable. But yeah, that's another one of the kind of modern freak show cars. But in that car, I believe, is still in Australia being raced.
Is it really?
Yeah.
That thing had some miles on it.
Yeah.
He played with that for years.
For years. Yeah.
For years. But there was that whole transition period. Like, so you had the Peanuts car, the Snoopy car. They used to play circus music at Lions when they were bringing out the funny cars. This was a whole.
Yeah.
How did we miss this era?
I know, and ironically, that's one of the things that John Smizer hated about it. And he's very bitter in those stories that from Drag Racing Magazine. It's back-to-back issues in 1968. He's very bitter about the idea of being a circus performer. He was a successful Top Fuel racer, and he was like a purist. He loved his Top Fuel dragster. He loved going and just racing the other guys that he thought were very smart and in tune. And he thought these funny car guys were just a bunch of lunatics that were just out there to kill themselves and make a buck on the way. And, he says a bunch of stuff about them, like they don't even know how to read their spark plugs and this, that, and the other thing. But he was like offended to be considered a funny car guy. So to your point, I mean, they're playing circus music. He must have wanted to climb under a rock.
Well, now, when I came up in the middle 1980s, when I started getting involved in all that stuff, there was still a lot of that. There were still a lot of guys that were running like just match race funny cars that were kind of like that. They really didn't know what they were doing, But back then, you could make a living. You didn't have to go fast. All you had to do was just show up, be on at least 75% nitro, be able to get it off the start, do a burnout, get it off the starting line. You got paid for it. Yeah. So all through like the 1970s and 1980s, people remember the hitter cars. They remember, Schumacher's car. They remember, the Wonder Wheel.
Prudhomme and all those guys, yeah.
Right, but for every one or two of those, there were a dozen leakers, and these guys really had no idea what they were doing. It was just monkey see, monkey do. I remember the standard thing when 1984, 1985, the standard tune-up was if you pull the plugs out of the engine and they resembled spark plugs. You know what I'm talking about?
Right. Boat yay big, boat yay round. Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah. Send it. Yeah.
The fuel dragster guys are looking at the spark plugs and saying, like, okay, 3 rings of heat, we're good, right? And the fuel funny car guys are taking the spark plugs out, and it's like, if you can see any trace of ceramic or ground strap, it wasn't fire on that cylinder. So that's awesome. That lasted. And you know who was one of those people? Force.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, that's a great point. It's a great point.
He was a notorious leaker.
Oh, yeah.
But that teaming up with Austin Coyle made all the difference in the world. And you could argue that Coyle and the Chi-Town Hustler were probably one of, at least in the Midwest, I would say, one of the first true race cars. Right, so you had the Mr. Norms deal.
Gary Dyer.
Dyer, right? Gary Dyer was serious. Mr. Norm wasn't really. He didn't care, right? He was here. Just get our name out there. But Dyer was a real racer, and Coyle, the Chi-Town Hustler team, really started to bring the professionalism into funny car racing around '67.
Yeah, no, and his approach, Austin Coyle's approach was probably 10 years ahead of anybody's at that time, and and to your point. One of the things about the Chi-Town Hustler that it became very well known because it was like a vaudeville act. They raced that car like 5-6 nights a week. They would perform at every hole in the wall they could. So they barely ever ran a national event because it didn't make sense for them. They would go out and make whatever it was, $1,500 or $1,000 10 times a week. If you go to the national event, you get blasted out in the first round, you get a case of oil and a kick in the ass, and they tell you to leave. Like it just wasn't worth their time.
Well, but even then, they weren't at national events. The NHRA didn't recognize the class until '69.
Right. And so when Coyle, like they match raced that car like lunatics all the way through the 70s, and then Coyle, the way that the economics started to change, they decided to start dipping their toe in the national event side. They got some money from, I believe it was Strange Engineering that threw them some money first, but yeah, and they go and so 82 and 83 back-to-back world champions in funny car, and people are like, where did these guys come from? It's like, bro, they've been kicking ass for 15 years, man. Where have you been? Yeah.
The original Hustler, is that still around? Not the original Hustler. The original Hustler was a Barracuda. The Charger, is that still around?
I believe so. I mean, I know it's been recreated. I don't know if the original exists, but I know that car has definitely been recreated. And, Pat Minnick's grandson, Mike, is a great racer himself. He's a funny car driver. So it's kind of cool that the grandson does the same job that Pat was doing.
Now, the neat thing about that car, and a lot of people don't realize it because you only see pictures of it doing burnouts, these fog bank burnouts, right? But the neat thing about that car is that everything was offset on that.
Yes. Yeah.
The driver was offset all the way to the left. The engine, or to the driver's side, is normal. And they had an escape hatch. It was the first car with an escape hatch that tilted up right at just where the door would open. It had an escape hatch. And the drivetrain of the car was offset all the way to the right to offset that tendency for the rear end to unload the right.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
So, so that when you look at, if you ever see, I don't know if anybody will ever see pictures of that car, with the body off of it, the driver's all the way over here and the engine's all the way over there.
It's basically the exact opposite of a super modified car. If you've ever seen a supermod car at a circle track, which if you've never seen them this summer, find a circle track and go see super modifieds because they're friggin' insane. But a supermod has the motor hanging off the left and the driver to the right because obviously it's trying to make left-hand turns. But I do think Coyle used, I think there was some of that in that design when and the guy was, still is like an intuitive genius, like so many of these guys, like just has the intuition to look at something and do it. And I believe too, it's probably one of those things. Well, if an inch is good, a foot's probably better. Like the further we can get that over here, the further we can get you over here, it's probably going to make it better for all of us. Yeah.
He really was a genius. Dale Armstrong gets credit really for inventing the modern era, but I think it was more Austin Coyle. Coyle is a really good guy. Coyle. So when I was racing with Lagana for those years, those dark years, all I see is flames. It's terrible.
Speaking of drag strip oddities, yeah.
I have PTSD still from that, right? But Austin, so Bobby's niece, Lisa, was an English leather calendar girl contest winner, okay? And Austin met Lisa at Englishtown the same year that she had won, or it might have been the same day that she won the English leather calendar girl contest. And they started dating, and they ended up getting married.
To this day.
So Austin used to, and at that time, he started working for Force. So Austin used to put together care packages for us. And he'd come over with milk crates and stuff full of pistons and rods and bearings. Here you go. And we ran the funny car road for that for as long as he was around. And anytime we did a cool. Event, he'd give us, here's some crankshafts, here's some this. And then we finished blowing it up. They started blowing it up, and we would finish blowing it up.
Yeah, in his kind of that high-pitched voice he has, he can almost, with his toothpick coming over, you guys could probably use this. Yep. Yeah.
He's a really, really good guy.
Yeah, and still follows the sport to this day, and there are still people that pick up the phone and touch base with him. Some of these modern crew chiefs will still give him a phone call if they get a little lost on something or they get down the wrong path or they want to explore some sort of idea. He's probably tried it, and he's kind of a first call like, hey, would it be worth? It's like, we did that in '87 and it sucked. Don't try it now.
They have. Sorry, my dogs are going nuts over here. They had Kathy will remember this too. Kathy's over here. We were running we was running off a ramp truck. We had a Ford.
Oh yeah, legendary.
Right,
legendary.
So, but this was still with the funny car. We still had the funny car.
Okay. And
it was the weekend that we burned the funny car to the ground on live TV. All right, against Force in the first round at Englishtown. Right. There's a whole story about that. I won't get into that now. But I remember pulling into the pits at that event, and we were pitted directly across from Force's operation, and it was insane. It was the first time like this had really been like Forrest was spending the money. He got the
Gotcha.
money cash flow. Now he's going to spend it. And there were 3 18-wheelers. There was one for each car. He had his regular car, the backup car, okay? And then in the middle, they had Austin's Technology Center. So it was a full 18-wheeler that was packed with computers and every bit of machinery, everything you can imagine to fabricate, to test, and we're looking at this. We got this ramp truck, and we got this funny car body, this whole fashioned with balsa and duct tape, and like that. And we're like, yeah, you know what? I think we're done. I don't see how we can continue doing this. It was demoralizing.
Man. So what happened? Did the thing kick the rods out of it or something?
Oh, geez. We qualified. We ran 3 570. We ran, 4 570 runs in a row, which was a big deal for that car, right? And so we qualified like number 15, whatever it was. We qualified at the back of every field, and we had Force in the first round. So on the last run, the baffles in the oil pan broke loose when Bobby hung the laundry, okay? So the baffles in the oil pan broke loose. So help me, this is a true story, okay? So this is at like 7,800 RPM through the through the lights, and now 0 oil pressure, right? So it tore every main out of the engine, okay? Just absolutely destroyed the bottom of the motor. We're out of everything, okay? And that was actually the block from my fuel altered, because we had blown up all of his stuff. So we were using my stuff now, right? We were raiding my own personal stash to keep this car running. So we get it back to the pits, we pull the motor out, and it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and we're like, there's just nothing we can do with this, right? Yeah. And then we realized, okay, wait, all we got to do is just stage. All we got to do is do the burnout, stage, take the green. We got $6,500. It's enough to go pick up another block and put all of this stuff back together again. And we had match races lined up, and the match races paid the bills. Yeah. So Bobby starts cutting up Coke cans. And we JB welded Coke cans into the block to act as shims, so we could get bearings in there.
Get out of here.
We took a crank that was buried in the bottom of the ramp truck. It was a 1/2-inch stroker crank, and it was all bent and warped and shit like that. And we stuck that in there. You couldn't turn this motor over with a breaker bar. I mean, it was brutal. Okay. But remember, all he's got to do
just chug it,
right, and shut it off. Just take the green and shut it off. So now we're working on this thing all through the night. The sun comes up, right? And there's a $6,500 thing. So it's worth it. We have to do this, okay? But I don't have to be here for this now. I'm done. I'm tired. I live 20 miles down the road. I'm like, Bobby, I'll see you back at the shop. I'm going home, going to sleep, right? So in my mind, that's what's going to happen. There's no reason for me to be there. You see where this is going, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm mowing my lawn. I says, hey, you know what? The race is live today. Let me go take a quick look at that, right? So I go in the house. So help me if I'm lying buying. I turn on the TV, and there's Bobby climbing out of the escape hatch on fire. What did you do? What happened, right? So I drop everything I'm doing, and I drive back out to the track. Again, it's English town, 20 miles from my house. I'm like, gotta go see what's going on. So I get there. I got there, Brian. Everything was still hot. That's how long it took me to get there. Everything was still hot. Bobby, what happened? So
oh my God.
He says, I train him. And he did.
Oh my God.
He trained him. You know, he did this merry little burnout, right? Because, you know, he knew, right?
Yeah.
Staged. And when the tree come down, he was like, I guess just adrenaline took over. Like, I'm not guilty of that myself. But adrenaline took over. He nails it. He trees Force, and he says, well, hey, just go with it. He got up about 300 feet and volcano this. Just blew everything to Kingdom Come. And that was the end of the funny car. And with that, I took all of the money I could get my hands on and bought Wayne Selko's top alcohol dragster chassis. and then we put whatever fuel parts we could find in there, and then we ran it as a fuel dragster. And that's where the Scud era began, because we had the dragster now. But
Yeah. And you put it up over. Yeah. If you've never seen pictures of this thing, the dragster up over the top of the ramp truck is the greatest. I mean, it looks like a Nike missile on the back of a truck from the '60s. It's unreal.
Yep. It was the only way we could get it to the track.
Yeah.
You know, we were the last of the regular T-shirt. You know, we're just mechanics trying to do the thing with fuel cars, and then it was over. That era had come to an end.
Yeah, and look, when I first started working for IHRA, this would have been more than 20 years ago now. They were still coming out. They weren't running necessarily the whole tour, but they were running most of the tour. And the first 2 years, they were still on the back of that damn ramp truck. And then they ended up with like an old chaparral type deal they were towing around. But, those guys, the Laganas, and obviously Bobby's gone on now to be a world championship crew chief with Steve Torrance 4 times over, and his brother Dominic's an incredible guy, and he's as whip smart and all this stuff as well. It's the ultimate example of learning the hard way. And I don't think, those guys obviously went through some pretty tough times, I think, in their lives at the expense of those cars back in the day. But I'm glad for both of them that they came out on the other side of it with what they have now. Obviously, Dominic's been through a ton, but it's just like they're very good people.
Well, they both have. They've both been through the meat grinder.
Yeah.
The incident with Bobby Jr. at Leicester was when I quit. I was done.
Yeah.
I was the first one on the scene. We go to retrieve the car. We can't find the car.
Yeah, so what he's talking about here is Bobby's junior now, who's now the crew chief with Steve Torrance. He went off the end of Empire Dragway in New York, and that's where now you're looking for the car in the woods.
Well, okay. So what happened was we ran a match race the week before, broke the bottom frame rail in the chassis. Okay. Car shouldn't have been run, and I knew that. I'm like, I know, like, we're at the end of the line here. This came because we already crashed the car twice. Crashed the car at West Hampton, and where was the other place we crashed the car? The West Hampton thing was a real mess. It tore the front of the car off and all kinds of. But anyway, the car was at the end of its line. I knew that, and it broke a frame rail, and it shouldn't have been on the track. But when you're in that lifestyle and you just keep taking your chances and you keep rolling the dice, and it's like, sorry, Bobby. The problem with working with Bobby Senior was that he would never run it through the lights. You could never get a consistent. He was always out of it 20 feet before, 30 feet before, and you could never get a consistent run out of the thing. So I talked him into putting Junior in the car. So we spent the whole year with Junior, getting him used to driving the car and acclimated and everything else. And Leicester was his first event. We got him his license, and Leicester was his first event. So the car passed tech, and the car should not have passed tech. And I had a big problem with the tech inspector afterwards, because okay, we're there, but you really should not have passed this car.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So make a long story short, first round, and it was his first round of competition. Car got out about 300 feet, and we see nothing but smoke. The whole track just disappears in smoke. Because remember now, you're on the starting line and you're looking out, right? And zero, nothing. So like, okay, well, blew the tires off, no big deal. Let's pack it up and go home. So we drive out to go retrieve the car, and I see the other car. I forget who it was, but I see the other car, and they're loading the chutes up, and I'm looking for our car. I'm like, where the hell is our car? And I'm driving, and I don't see the freaking car. How do you miss a top fuel dragster? Where did it go? Right?
30 feet long. Yeah.
I get to the end of the shut-off area, and I saw that the fence posts were all broken. They had a chain link fence that surrounded the property, okay? And as I'm getting to the end of the shut-off area, like where the sand trap is, I see that all of the fence posts are broken, and the chain link fence is going down like this. And then I saw that the fence went into the woods, and that's when it dawned on me what happened. So I jumped out of the truck, and I ran along the fence into the woods, and it looked like a plane crash. Like you couldn't identify anything as a race car, anything. And I was, it was pretty fucking jacked up. And I was there by myself. Bobby was still in the truck. So I looked at the fence, and the fence had the roll cage of the car wrapped up in the fence.
Oh,
So the motor had broken away and the front end had broken away, but the roll cage part with him in it was wrapped up in the chain link fence. So I unwrapped it from the chain link fence. And I rolled, you get that Superman strength, okay? And I rolled it over, and he was alive. He was missing a couple of fingers, and his leg was all jacked up, but he was alive. And that's when I said to myself, right then and there, right? Because I helped get him out of the car. I helped find bone, fingers and stuff like that. Give him to the EMT people, and then as they were flying him away, I was like, I'm done.
Yeah,
over, and that was it. Cold turkey. I walked away from drag racing.
Yeah, I mean, the circus leaves town, right? That's when something like that happens. The circus leaves town. Like, there's no that you even if you would force yourself to show up the next week to piece the thing back together, your heart wasn't going to be there. I mean, that's a traumatic experience. So I can totally understand that. That's wild. Yeah,
we had been pushing the limits for way too long. You know what I'm saying? Like we were racing like it was 1975.
Yeah, and it just wasn't anymore.
And it wasn't that way anymore.
Yeah.
So, but that's that. Now, Bobby's original car, the Chevamoko.
Oh, the Chevamoko car is spectacular.
Yeah.
Chevamoko. This goes right into our. There was a brilliantly very long segue we just had right there to get to Chevamoko, but we got there. So, Ford Falcon with a wacko extended chassis, so the front end's hanging kind of almost out in front of the nose of the thing with a big block Chevy in it. The Chevamoko.
The Chevamoko. It wasn't really successful.
It exists. Do you know it exists?
I know it exists. There's a guy up in Wingdale, New York, I think.
Yes.
It's got it. I'd love to say I've never seen that car in person.
It is everything you think it would be, and probably a little bit more, because they've dragged it around to some of our events. They brought it down, I think, to Charlotte a few years ago to put it on display, and it's like you walk around this thing, and every part of it is trying to kill you, even when it's sitting still, let alone actually moving under its own power. Yes.
Yeah, for you guys, again, see, I'm not able to put pictures on here. Sorry about that. I know, but Google images Chevamoko. And so that was, again, his first car. His second one was a car called the American Challenger, which I almost bought. I came very close to buying it. Now, for the life of me, I don't know how Bobby drove this thing. I come across this car. I was looking for a funny car. And I didn't care what it was at this point. It didn't make any difference. So I come across this Challenger, the guy selling Challenger funny car, and as it turns out, it was Bobby's original car, the American Challenger, and it was the weirdest. Somebody built that. Bobby didn't build it. Somebody built this car, and the cockpit on it was in such a way. I got to go back like this, right? That you had to sit like this to drive the car. I don't. Bobby was my height. I'm 5'10". Bobby was my height, and probably he was a little stockier than I was.
Yeah.
How he drove this car, I have no clue. But he ran that for a season or two.
Man, I've seen photos of that thing, and it looked pretty nice. It had kind of like a pearlescent, like a pearl white paint on it and everything. It looked like a pretty nice. I mean, outwardly looked like a nice car. Yeah.
Well, there were so many cars like that.
Well, we got to talk about this Dave Zachary car that was the lead image on the deal for tonight, the Cadillac Eldorado. We have to tell the Dave Zachary story that is just.
You probably know. Okay, now I wrote a story about that for Dragzine in I don't know, a long time ago.
Sure.
But honestly, I don't remember many of the details. Just that it had sewer pipes, single page.
So Dave Zachary's a body shop owner. He lives, I believe, in Tennessee, somewhere in the south, the mid-south, let's call it. He's a body shop owner, and he wants to go funny car racing, wants to do something unique. So he gets a Cadillac Eldorado and makes a 1-to-1 scale fiberglass body out of this thing. The chassis is this incredibly rudimentary kind of rectangle tube square with a 3-point hoop over the top of it, which Tony says is probably made out of aluminized muffler tubing for all we know. And he basically puts like a stock big block Chevy in this thing and goes out and runs around with it.
Yeah.
And it's slow, but it does its thing and everything's fine. And then he decides he wants to actually go racing. So he goes and drags his ass all the way up to California to get a shiny new Keith Black blown 426 Hemi, which he does, and he puts the Hemi in this car and takes it up to Kentucky to go test it. And, the accounts I've read and the newspaper stories of the day say that the thing basically took flight at the top of the racetrack and, landed,
Down.
roof down and just total, there was, the only good thing was it was a very quick end.
I hope it was.
Yeah.
Though I did a story for, there was what was it? It was called Those Who Tried and Those Who Died. And this is
wow.
Yeah, this was somebody was bringing back Cars Illustrated magazine, and I did a story specifically on all of these different, and it was years ago now, on all of these different cars that ended up, all these different. Let's not even talk about it.
But yeah, so for Zachary, it's like the great irony that the car actually worked almost too well. Like it wasn't the fact that the thing caught on fire and burned him up or something like that. It was the fact that it was actually going fast enough to fly. You know what I mean? It's like, who would have thunk it? And if you look at pictures of the thing, you'll see somewhere it actually has a little chin spoiler on it, because before the accident, he had that sensation of the car getting very light in the nose on some previous runs. So he had put this chin spoiler on to try to knock some of the air down and force the nose in, but it wasn't enough. It was just too much car frontal area. The thing sat real high, so you get all this air trapped up underneath it.
It takes off like a plane.
Yeah, like a plane. Like the first guy to ever really fly a car at the drag strip was Tom McEwen, and that the Hemi Cuda. So 1967, the Chrysler dealers of the Los Angeles area, they get together. They want to build some exhibition car, and so they basically build the Hearst Hemi under glass, but make it not a wheel standard. They want to make this as an actual race car. And it was at Lions that McEwen, there's these incredible photos. The thing, just like a modern drag radial car that takes off and flies. It's exactly what happened to this thing.
Well, they were running similar miles an hour, and they had similar characteristics. And that's the thing. Now we missed that era, the golden era of drag racing, but I see it being replicated all the time now in the no prep world.
Yeah. Well, listen, the modern no prep, especially modern small tire no prep cars, and they're starting to normalize a little now, but the last 4 to 5 years, the rules have been so wide open. You've seen these things where, guys run them with no nose on it, and then they got like a weight bar that's 6-8 feet long with a bunch of dumbbell weights hanging off the back. Yep. This is stuff that exists. This is stuff that guys did 50, 60, 70 years ago that we see back kind of on the front page.
That's my appeal, though, because that's exactly it. They're recreating the match race madness days.
Yeah.
And they're doing it on similar track surfaces, because back then, the track surfaces that people know today did not exist back then. They were running basically no prep all the way through, what would you say, around 1972? Wasn't it really like the Winston money came in that they started really prepping things?
Yeah, and let's be honest, that was only at a handful of tracks around the country. Like the majority of your local racetracks were still basically run a broom over it and frickin' go.
Yep. So let's run through we're ignoring everybody because we're rambling on over here. So let's run through here, see if anybody brings up any cars. So what I'm not good at this. Yes, it is a 68 Eldorado. Okay, Jerry Tully here is doing the whole thing on Dave Zachary. So I can't read the comments and do this at the same time. It's that autism.
I can scroll through them real quick.
So what would you consider to be the freakiest thing that you know of?
The freakiest, look, Captain Jack McClure's Rocket Go-Kart, I think is a top fiver on that list. One, because he still has it and he's 99 years old and he drove it a few years ago, but this was a legitimate go-kart built by a guy in Florida to his specification. It was a lay-down style go-kart that had a hydrogen peroxide rocket engine, would run in the 6-second bracket, over 200 miles an hour. Just everything about it says this guy should have died 5 minutes in, and he drove the thing for
Really consistently.
10, 15 years, and he still has it.
Could you imagine what kind of ride that is 2 inches off the ground?
I mean, just it's
I mean, I was like, I used to own the Brewmaster. I had the Brewmaster at one point. And that was converting that to be a nostalgia top fuel car back in 1989, because that's when the whole thing had just gotten started, right, with Jim Davis and all of that. And I was like, yes, yeah, I want to do this. So I picked up the old Brewmaster, and it was a Woody Gilmore Flexi Flyer.
nice.
It was actually, if you're familiar with Gilmore's cars, it was the very last one built with an Oldsmobile rear, and then from there the Chrysler rear.
Yep.
So, but anyway, it was a Flexi Flyer. It was originally the Brewmaster, and this guy Jimmy Messenger drove it. And the thing with Messenger is that he was an acid head. So now, yeah. Now I've done both, okay? You know, fuel and acid, and not at the same time. Like, so I want to know what this guy, because it's okay. So if you've never driven anything like this, especially at night, it's the most surreal thing you could possibly imagine. Okay, like sitting there dead straight, right? You know, sober as a Mother Mary. Okay, just like right. It's the most surreal, mind-bending thing you can imagine. And this guy was doing this on acid. He was running this car. That was his thing. Jimmy Messenger on acid in the Brewmaster. So, but I don't even know where I was going with that.
Well, it's insane. You were talking about the start of the nostalgia top fuel deal, and how you got a hold of that car.
Yeah, but there was something before that. I don't know. I got off on a tangent.
You're talking about Captain Jack McClure, 2 inches off the ground.
Oh, how surreal that must have been. How crazy that would be.
Yeah.
So now I knew Slammin' Sammy Miller.
Oh, there you go, man. Yeah.
So now and Sammy was the mellowest person you would ever meet. He was I built a funny car for the Petosa brothers. This was back in 1990.
Petosa brothers, they had some good looking stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the car that was actually a lot of Jerry Caminito's old stuff.
Okay.
That I recycled, put the car together for the Petosa brothers, and then they ended up hiring Mark Oswald.
Yeah.
On the car, and they had the NHRA mile an hour record with that in 91. And that was all hand-me-down Jerry Caminito stuff. Crazy.
Oh, that's freaking awesome.
But Sammy was the mellowest guy you'd ever want to meet. Like, you'd never know that he was the quickest and fastest accelerating human on Earth. I think he still has those records.
I believe he does, and I think he still has the ice record that he set too. He set the speed record on ice with that drag. He had a dragster that he took up to Lake George, New York. This was in late 70s, very early 80s. You can go look at it. It was sponsored by a porno magazine called Rooster, and it had a hydrogen. It is an actual dragster on 4 skates, and he went 250 miles an hour across the lake with this thing on ice.
Now he had a Camaro. He had an IROC Camaro, current year, whatever it was.
Okay.
IROC Camaro that had a hydrogen peroxide rocket in the trunk, and supposedly he ran 205 with that. In English, it was a stock 305 5-speed IROC with the hydrogen peroxide rocket in the trunk, and he showed me pictures of it. And supposedly he ran 205 with it.
Wow, that is insane. I hadn't heard about that, but I have no reason to think it's not true.
Well, if you go hunting for any information on his car, it's null and void. But this is just from him showing me pictures. You know, we're standing there in a Petosa's shop, and he's like, "Let me show you my Camaro," and it had a hydrogen peroxide rocket in the trunk. And he was the reason why the government banned the sale of hydrogen peroxide, because he used to have this car on the ramp truck, and he had these hydrogen peroxide canisters. Now, so now pure hydrogen peroxide, if you pour pure hydrogen peroxide on concrete, the concrete bursts into flames.
Yeah, anything organic. And when it touches, and it'll set. So there's a guy named Eric Tabul that runs he was the first person ever run on the 4s on a motorcycle. He had a rocket bike that he still ran in Europe up till just a couple years ago. There was a guy that got killed a few years ago named Francois Guissy. He was from France. He had a bicycle, a hydrogen peroxide rocket bicycle.
I've seen that.
200 something miles an hour. So I actually had run some of his stuff on Bank Shift when he first started running that thing. So he and I maintained email contact until he unfortunately died on the thing. But he made a video illustrating the potency of the the pure hydrogen peroxide. He takes the hydrogen peroxide and pours it on a leather glove on the ground, and the glove bursts into flames. Anything organic is on fire if it touches pure hydrogen peroxide. That includes you.
Well, Sammy used to have these canisters of this stuff, and he would just strap them to the back of his ramp truck and drive down the road with them. He got pulled over by DOT. It was like, what is this stuff? And that was it. From that point, they banned the sale of hydrogen peroxide, to the general public, and that's when he had to start running his stuff over in Europe.
Yeah, the early '80s, right? That's when he went over there and was doing it. And EJ Potter, the motorcycle is one thing, but the Allison-powered full-size cars are, to me, fall under this list of obscurities and oddities. The motorcycle is its own entity in the galaxy of drag racing, but Nightmare 1 and Nightmare 2 is 57 Plymouth Savoy, and then the 63 Dart with the Allison aircraft engines in them. Chef's kiss. And of course, that Jim Lytle with the Big Al car. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And the aircraft stuff, look, the aircraft's engine thing, by 1959, 1960, the aircraft engine thing became a big problem for Wally Parks because, when you had Art Arfons, setting top speed of the meet here or there, like World Series of Drag Racing 54, he goes to 150, then he sets top speed of the meet 59. It's like, it was kind of annoying for Wally. But then in 60, he moves the race to Detroit to get in front of all the car companies. And like 10 guys show up with aircraft powered dragsters. And he was like, no, we're done with this now. And, but if you look back at pictures from the 60 Nationals, there's Ranger engines, there's Continental engines, there's Allison engines, there's a freaking Rolls Royce there. It's insane.
Okay. So you want to talk about freaks. Okay. Now, maybe you have more information on this than I do. Okay. There's a center spread. I have tons of old magazines, and I don't know if I'll be able to find it. There's a center spread in one of the lower quality kind of magazines from the era 1965, 1966. There were a bunch of rags out there.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So this was a center spread, and it was a series of pictures of a dragster.
The guy that gets killed, that's Lee Pendleton's old car. That was Lee Pendleton's dragster. The guy driving it had bought it from Pendleton. But the car had an Allison, and I believe it had supplemental rockets on it.
It had two hydrogen peroxide. So it had an Allison, two hydrogen peroxide rockets. And from what I could tell, a good portion of the car was made out of wood.
It appeared, well, when it was flying apart, it sure looked like it. But that was very controversial. I had that magazine as well. And the big controversy was it was pictures of a fatal accident, which right. Like, were verboten. Nobody ever showed that. And
they never mentioned the guy's name. And to this day, I still don't know. I mean, if you're going to go out in a blaze of glory like that, at least, give the guy some credit, right?
They give a little like circular blurb on the cover, and then you open up the center of the magazine, and it's just, this thing is just, it's literally going to pieces. Yeah.
There were a lot of things like that.
Yeah, and I think the freak show stuff to me separates in a few categories, right? We separated into propulsion, which we've kind of talked about tonight. We separated into the audio visual portion of it, and then the actual drivetrain. But Gary Gablich's car, which I included in a video of 5 failures of drag racing, but Gablich's car was just this incredible conglomeration of the worst of everything put into one pie. A shitty wagon body that has horrendous aerodynamics, a mid-mounted blown nitro-burning Hemi, and then all-wheel drive with absolutely no way to manage the power anywhere.
And a monocoque chassis.
And a monocoque chassis.
It's just like, let's just throw all of the conventions, anything that we can think of, let's just throw it away. Yeah. We'll just make sure it has 4 wheels and a blown fuel Chrysler in it, and then just forget about everything else. We're going to start with just clean slate of paper, first pass on this thing, and it's done.
It's funny that the number of people, and I don't blame them for it because why would they know? But the number of people that initially commented on that video saying that it was an AI generated photo, an AI generated image I used as the lead, and I understand why, because it looks as though some AI thing would kick it out. Yeah,
it looks so outrageous. Yes, it's something that AI would come up with. And you had back then, you had a lot of people will play with compressed air cars about that era too.
Yes.
1970, 1971. Art Malone had one.
Yeah, Malone had one. Garlett's built I guess Garlett's was Malone, the old Malone car. But then you had like the Speed Sport guys put together that wild car that was actually powered by the aircraft starter motors. You had guys trying that technology, which were these basically like they were these little miniature turbines, but they were shaft driven turbines. So it looks like a jet car, but it's actually a shaft driven setup on it. That was a Speed Sport car. Yeah, you had Kenny Ellis. Kenny Ellis built a series of 3-wheel dragsters back in the late 50s, early 60s, and Ellis, hung with that idea for many years until finally someone said, "Hey, listen, you've lived long enough. Let's not, let's stop." Yeah. And then, US Turbine won. I mean, Turbonique, I think, and one of the things about Turbonique that people, and you've written extensively about it, it's like, there was a ton of Turbonique powered cars out there. Like people don't realize it. Like it wasn't just one or two. Like there was a dozen cars match racing their wheels off around the country on every given week. The Turbo Stang, and of course the Black Widow Volkswagen everybody knows because it was in the ads, and the US Turbine 1 dragster. Yeah.
That Galaxy. What is the
Tobacco King car? Yeah.
Oh, beautiful car that is.
Yeah. Yeah, that thing's incredible.
I would like to find a drag axle. It's one of those things that's always in the back of my head.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't think the odds of finding one reasonably together are very good, but that's something I would love to play with.
I did do a video, like this is probably a year and a half ago. You can go back and find it if you want, about the only Turbonique car that ever won an organized drag race, which was an altered. The Turbonique is mounted up front where a normal engine would be, and it was shaft. It actually shaft drove the rear axle, and it had the exhaust pipe. It was like this huge 6-inch pipe that came right up past the driver's head. And I actually found photography of it, and it's cool because it's black and white, but you can see the flame kind of leaping out of the top of this thing. But it was funny because, like the problem with a lot of this research is pretty much everybody involved in all this stuff has died or they're unreachable. So it's like that alter was put in a category that was designated as T/US. And I asked all these old AHRA guys, like, hey, what was the designation? And they're like, hey, listen, Jim Tice would just make up classes like on the fly. He didn't give a shit. Like if you had something, yeah, cool, put it out there.
Right.
But basically, long story short, is I actually found somebody and the designation was turbine unlimited size. That was what they, yeah.
I wonder if there was anything else that ran in that.
Well, I think it was a 1-car category because his winning elapsed time was like 11:50.
Oh, look at my trophy.
Yeah. But he does go into the books, and he was, in Drag World magazine or whatever their AHRA publication was back then as a class winner at the Spring Nationals of '68 in Bristol.
I'm just looking at some of these.
Yeah.
Steve Paul's saying, no, Tony, you do not need a drag axle. I don't need one, but I'd like one.
Yeah, you want one.
I would think it would be really cool.
I always thought that wacko supercharger they made, they had the supercharger that was basically the drag axle, but you mount it to the top of the motor, and it had a spark plug in it. You hit the button, it would fire the spark plug, and this one would, spin around like a pinwheel and suck more. I mean, that to me was even crazier to some degree than the damn drag axle.
I saw a drag test on that setup, and it was on a 64, 65 Barracuda, 273, and it ran like 1150 on that Grenade supercharger.
With a 273 in it?
Yeah, completely stock 273. Through the single exhaust, the whole thing. Ran like 1150.
Oh, that is spectacular. Turbocharging, obviously, we talk about the history of that, and, it was kind of freaky to, 1965, you got the Malico brothers Malico brothers win their class at the Winter Nationals with twin turbos in 65. And, a lot of guys, Bob Keller was messing with a bunch of stuff in the mid 60s there. And it's so normal now, but back then this was like freak show stuff. Like why bother with that? It's like you guys have no idea what you're missing out on right now.
Do you remember? I don't know if you're old enough. Do you remember the Duraliner?
The Volkswagen?
No. That's a Durachrome Bug, but that's another freak. Oh, what a beautiful car that was! Always one of my favorites when I was a kid. No, the Duraliner. It was a top fuel dragster. So it was like 1980. I was in Pomona with somebody. I forgot who it was. It was my second time at Pomona, and this thing was in top fuel, and it was a quad turbocharged blown fueler, right? So it was the craziest thing I've ever seen, right? So the car did the burnout. It was quiet but weird sounding. I don't know if you ever heard like turbocharged nitro. It's something that really doesn't belong together. Okay, it's like a cackling whisper. It's strange. But he staged the car. Okay, tree goes green, and the car really doesn't move. But it took everything from the motor plate to the center section and just threw it out. the clutch, the can, right? The reverser, the front of the rear, everything just tossed it out. It was nothing.
Freaking wow.
I don't think the car moves a foot.
Holy smoke. Gene Snow had a twin turbocharged funny car that they tested in the late 1960s, and that 68, 69 time frame. He didn't drive it. I think Jake Johnson or somebody drove it for him. But
that was later than that. That was 70.
Was it 70?
77.
Okay.
Because he had an injected nitro car. I hate to talk about that guy.
I know.
I hate to bring him up the wall, but you got to credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
At the time, he had the regular funny car. He had an injected nitro car, and then he had the turbocharged car. And if I'm not mistaken, he was playing with a compressed air car too at the time.
Well, very well could have been.
There were a bunch of people that were messing around with compressed air cars. This was in, and they had different versions of it. Some of them used scuba tank, and there were all different craziness happening back then. But the turbochargers were catching on. That was a thing, or it should have become a thing, and I don't know why it took like 20 years.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, like watching the very early years of when it really became. When a lot of pro mod racers started to try again in like the early 2000s, and Annette Summer and Vern had their Corvette with the twins on it, Mike Moran, some of these guys. It was like when digital electronic fuel injection that could be actually tunable and a digital ignition came out, that's what changed the whole game on turbocharging at the high level. Like back in the day, I think to your point, I think it could have been something for a while, and then the other stuff would have advanced away from it because of the lack of tunability, but then it would have caught up again. But yeah, it shouldn't have had this dark age. Like there was like a dark ages of turbocharging that happened in drag racing from the early 70s until, at a very high level, like about 30 years worth. Yeah. Well,
it really came to an end around 1971 with Ohio Georgia's car.
Yeah.
And but then that was it. It was just turbocharging disappeared. And yes, Snow had the twin turbocharged, had a turbocharged fuel car on alcohol at that time too. Because remember back then they considered alcohol fuel.
Yes, anything that wasn't gasoline was fuel.
Right.
Same as Bonneville today. That's straight out of the Bonneville rule book. When you go to Bonneville, anything that isn't gasoline is fuel, whether it's methanol, nitro, whatever.
Well, see, and that's another misconception. A lot of people don't realize that many of the cars that they consider to be fuel cars today from the day were actually alcohol cars.
Oh, yeah.
On alcohol, just during that golden era.
Listen, and the guys will even tell you, especially the guys that were there, like, Bill Donor in the 64 Funny Car Spectacular, like, those were not all nitro cars. And some of them weren't even alcohol cars. There were some gasoline burners kind of rolled up in that 64. There were 64 cars there, don't get me wrong, but it was not exactly 64 of the, highest level competitors in the nation.
Let me see. I'm just rolling through the comments over here. Somebody's saying somebody's selling compressed air injection now.
and it works very well. As far as compressed air supercharging, there's a guy, I think I don't know where he's based out of, but there are multiple high-level sportsman racers that are now running this guy's compressed air supercharging, and it's working very, very well. And yes, Gale Banks and Ron Hodgson had a turbocharged Top Fuel experimental car that basically was. They were told, "Hey, listen, even if you make this work, it's never going to see the light of day. So proceed as you will."
Banks might have been involved in that Duroliner car.
Okay,
Now that I think about it,
makes sense.
All right, but also, John Carrier was out there. Carrier's diesel. So charged diesel.
Yeah.
Top Fuel car. That ran. I don't remember what it ran, but I remember it was like, wow, that's really fast.
There was a guy from Connecticut, and he might have been running when you were still living up north. This guy, Doug Doring, had a Chevrolet truck that he ran in super gas with a 671 Detroit in it with twin turbos and a Lenko. And the thing was wacko. And he was allowed to use nitrous on it. It was weird because it was like the weird loophole in the rules was you could not use nitrous in the NHRA super classes unless you had a diesel engine. And he happened to be the only guy in the country that had a diesel powered anything that was running in super gas at that time. But I did a story on it years ago, but it was a really cool truck. It just, a 2-stroke Detroit diesel is a very cool engine as it is. But when you put a couple of real big honking turbos on it, it really gets with the program. Yeah.
Prudhomme was running nitrous in 75, 76. And when they banned the nitrous with him, because it was like unheard of in any of the classes. It was, remember, 1970s, right? He was running it for the purpose of saving pistons. So there wasn't any power to be had with it. He was losing the nitrogen to cool everything down and try to save pistons. And when the NHRA says, everybody was like protesting him because, he's the fastest guy on the block, and they banned nitrous oxide because of him, and it wasn't allowed in again until when did they start allowing nitrous? Because nitrous was absolutely forbidden for a while.
Yeah, I want to say sometime in maybe in the early 90s, it started to come back around. I'm sure it was about the time when they started looking at classes like Top Sportsman and looking at pro mod cars that they figured, okay, we got to make some concessions here if we want to actually have these guys come over. The other guy that used nitrous for a while was Dale Armstrong, and I talked to him about it. Obviously, he's passed away several years ago now, but I did some stories with him when he was still around, and I asked him about it, and he said the same thing you said, which was he's like, this was not at all for power. He used it to equalize cylinder temperatures, and because he said, listen, we'd have this problem dropping holes, and he's like, the cylinder temperatures are all over the place, so he could use the nitrous to actually, to kind of regulate cylinder temperature to try to stop the thing from dropping holes. And what he said was it was basically like a free flow system in that the nitrous was flowing at whatever PSI it was. And as soon as Bernstein would hit the gas, the pressure in the cylinder was stopping the flow of any nitrous making it in there.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what he told me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
See, now that was okay. So we're talking about freaks and stuff like that, but talk about just regular history now. The Armstrong and Bernstein relationship was really interesting, and that is literally what led to the modern era, like where we are today, because it was Armstrong that really discovered the relationship between load and fuel, and it was because of Bernstein's inconsistency. He wasn't the best driver.
Oh, he sucked ass. Like when he first started, he was horrible.
I was trying to be kind.
He was very bad. He was very bad. Listen, he's a Hall of Famer now, but when he started, he was as bad as it got.
Oh, it wasn't when he started. He was racing in the 60s.
In the front engine fuel cars. Yeah.
And then went right in fuel cars. And then he ran Ray Alley's car, the Engine Master's car. Yeah. He drove that. And then he got into the restaurant business, the Chelsea King. Made the money from that and then went back into funny car racing. So he built a car. Somebody tuned it, or he was tuning it. Somebody was tuning it. It doesn't matter. And it couldn't find the freaking Christmas tree, right? So he ends up hiring Dale Armstrong. So Armstrong was trying to soften the car up for him. So they had been coming right off what they call the Star Wars tune-up days, right? So this was like 70 degrees in the mag, right? 430 gear, just violent cars, right? So to soften the car up, Armstrong started fattening the thing just to get, and then just as he kept making it fatter and fatter, and the car became more consistent, they started loading it down more and more. And then finally, this thing that they can't load it down enough, and it's storming. They went right to the top of the heap, and that began the modern era. And I'll tell you how close I was to that. I worked for Jerry Caminito back in 1986. Right, it was like my first year really playing around with these cars. So I was just learning. I was cleaning oil pans and doing stuff like that. And we were at the Gator Nationals in 1986, and Ray Alley had the first race pack computer on Jerry's car, and I was on the car at that event.
Oh, how cool is that?
Yeah, it's like, and, you look back on it and say, that was also the event where Garlits showed up with the rubber bands on the front wheels.
Yes.
Which we're watching him tow this thing to the pits, and it's like, the butter has slipped off his noodle. There's just no way that's going to work, right? So he made the run, and I remember towing it back past us after the run, and the rubber bands were gone, and it was just the aluminum wheels scraping along. Exactly. And then we had the tornado.
At Gainesville?
That same year, we had a tornado coming. So again, I was the piss boy, because now I'm just trying to learn this stuff, right? Never mind, I'm a hotshot automotive journalist. No, I'm the piss boy. So whatever bottom of the barrel job that's got to be done, I got to do it. And then that's how you know what it is. You got to pay your dues, and you got to prove that I'm dedicated to this, right? So the sky turns black. The tornado sirens are going off. There's like, everybody's like, batten down the hatches. And you can see the sky is just black, and the wind is picking up. It's crazy. And the car is between the two trailers. Okay. Well, actually, no, we weren't even between two trailers. We were at the end space.
Oh God.
The car was open, and the top end of the motor was off. Like the blower was off, the valve covers were off. So everybody's piling into the trailer. And Al Hoffman, remember Al Hoffman?
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yes, Al Hoffman.
So Jerry and Marion and everyone else would climb into the trailer, right? And then Al Hoffman is like now the tornado's right here. It's like 50 feet away from us. There's shit flying everywhere. Jerry opens the trailer door, throws a tarp at me, and he says, "Cover the engine." So I did, right? So I grabbed this tarp and I dove over the car, and I'm hugging the frame rails, covering the motor with my body in the tarp, and the hell is blowing down, and it's like crazy. And Al Hoffman got into Jerry's trailer too. And as I reached the point that I was like, no, I'm going to die out here. This is bad, right? So I abandoned my post, and I tried to get into the trailer, and I'm pulling the door open, and Al Hoffman is pulling it back closed. Al wasn't a real guy either.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So I did, and I went back to my post, and I rode out the rest of the tornado. There was pieces of cars flying everywhere. It was a crazy thing.
So a couple of stories here. So my favorite two Al Hoffman stories. This is right about the time, early 90s, funny cars are going 300 miles an hour. And this, his son told me this story. He said some fans walked up, and Al's leaning over the car, and some guy yells out, "Hey, Al, she going to go 300 today?" And Al Hoffman turns around and looks at this guy and his female companion and says, "She'll go 350 if you keep feeding her." And he turns around and goes right back to work on the car again. And the second one is, apparently they're in the staging lanes, and he's getting suited up and everything, and some dude walks up and he's like, "Al, you going to kick some ass today?" He says, "Oh, you bet. I'm going to start with yours."
He was a good guy. He was a little crazy. Helen, his wife, was great with the blowers. She used to strip all of her blowers. But yeah, Al was definitely he earned a lot of the reputation that he had.
So two Kenny Bernstein stories, one of which is, and again, I say this with respect, when he started out, like when he in his modern era, past the 60s stuff, when he came back with the Chelsea King car and stuff, he was like, he had a lot to learn. So Tony Pedregon tells a story of being like 13 or 14 years old, just sitting in the stands of OCIR one day, hanging out with crews. They just would go down there on the weekends and watch racing. And he sees this beautiful truck and trailer pull in, and he sees this absolutely gorgeous funny car roll out the back, says Chelsea King down the side. And this thing leaves the starting line, goes about 200 feet, makes a dead right, and absolutely pile drives the wall. So they load all the pieces in the trailer and leave. He says like 3 weeks later, they're back sitting there. And here comes this beautiful truck. Here comes this beautiful car. It goes out about 400 feet, turns left, and piles the wall.
And that is when he hired Dale Armstrong.
Yeah.
So he could actually get the car to go straight down the track. And Armstrong's solution to that was just load this thing with as much volume as you possibly can, soften it up so that a little girl with polio can drive it. And the legend was born, and that was it. At one point, so he started with the one mag. He was overdriving it. He had, an early. I remember the setup. I remember looking at it. It was there at the pits. He had a 1200, and he was overdriving at like 30 degrees, 30% rather. And then he added the second 1200, and they were overdriving both of those. And then they added the down nozzles, then the second mag, and then a third mag. He actually, for a couple of races, there were 3 mags on that freaking car.
I know a guy named Jake Sanders that has one of the 3 mag drives. He has one.
Really?
Yes, he has a shop in Indy. Is a fabricator, collects a lot of stuff, but he has one of, I think only 3 of them ever made, but he has one of the 3 magneto drives that Dale Armstrong had commissioned to have made.
Crazy. How do you like that?
Yeah. In the photos of that.
I was the only one who saw that.
No, that's a real freaking deal. And apparently when he went to the twin mag setup, like Tim Richards walked up to him one race and he says, what do you want all that shit on your car for? And then they go out there and freaking set low ET by like a 10th. It's like, because of that. Yeah.
Yeah. But that was the end of it. That combination of Armstrong unlocking the secret. Okay. Because that really, up to that point, fuel races were just banging around in the dark. It was just like what worked, but nobody understood what worked. Why things did what they did. And if you look back at the early evolution of fuel racing, up until like let's say the early 80s or so, that's why you have so many of these crazy experiments. People trying all different things, and they can't figure out why. Why is it when I put a second engine on here, it eats itself alive? But it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Didn't understand because they didn't have the concept of load. But it was that combination of the information that Ray Alley was gathering with the race pack, with that first race pack, Armstrong learning how to fatten this thing, load it down, and actually work backwards kind of aerodynamics, because up to that point, and you see, that's a perfect example. I'm rattling off in all different directions. I'm sorry. The Jocko liner, or Garlic version of the Jocko liner, is a perfect example of they didn't understand the load, because they took this car. It was a conventional top fuel drag set. They shortened the wheelbase on, and it would run normal times without the body. But when they put the body on it, it would slow it way down. It would just start shooting ducks. And it's because they didn't understand load.
Center of pressure, all that stuff. Yeah. Jocko
had built a body that was just so slick, it didn't push any wind. And so there was no load for the thing to work against, and it wouldn't run.
If I ever really hit the lottery, like one of the things I would pay Garlitz $2.5 million. Just I want to see that car in the wind tunnel one time. Like I would like to see an actual wind tunnel study of that car, because I think it would be very interesting to see how close or how far off he was. Because obviously this whole thing that those cars that he built, and several were similar, but like you had the Jim Nelson car that set the speed record back in the day and then blew to pieces. But like to see that Jocko liner in a wind tunnel and understand and just to see how good the guy's brain was. I'd love to just see the drag and lift numbers on it. But you're right. I mean, I think that was the big problem there. They just didn't understand. And the engine was probably getting starved for air as well. That was probably one of the other problems in that. If the motor's getting, you have all this air flowing over this slick body. If you don't actually have enough feeding in the motor out, it's going to run like garbage too. So yeah, I think there was probably a combination of factors.
There's a combination of things, but I really think load was the big deal. But that, like I said, it was just that combination. It was Ray Alley and Dale Armstrong and that whole situation that led to the modern era. Because the clutch management systems came in immediately after that. We had a thing called the Bobby-matic. Yeah. So up to the point, everybody was running a Crowler glide. Everybody was running a six-figure Crowler glide. Okay, the simplest clutch in the world, right? So 1986 1987, 1988, the clutch management system started to come in. And this was high dollar stuff. This was like high dollar stuff. And we didn't know any. I mean, you know, we're not part of this brain trust. We don't know what these guys are doing. All we know is that, but from what we can see, is that they're using pneumatics to bring in extra fingers. Okay, so we bought a cover, a 9-finger cover instead of a 6-finger cover, a 9-finger cover from somebody. I forget who it was, and Bobby made up this contraption. Okay. That was a spring-loaded deal, a throw-up bearing, a spring-loaded deal that he could release. And there was I kid you not, okay, this is how broke we were. This is how on a budget we ran these things. He had a 1/2-inch wrench as a lever, right in front of the seat, okay? And it was all spring-loaded and had this whole contraption, this whole Rube Goldberg thing that went to the back of the car. And so it launched on the conventional clutch. And then when he pulled the 1/2-inch wrench, it would release the mechanism, and those extra 3 fingers would come in. So the first time we tried this thing, okay, where I forget what race we were at, I don't remember. Might have been Darlington. First time we tried this thing, car leaves normal. It's on a decent pass. Out about 300 feet, Bobby pulls the wrench. I never saw anything like this in my life. Okay. The whole car went boing. The whole thing, it was like boing. It broke everything. It broke instantly. It broke every single thing in the car, from the blower belt to the ring and pinion. It broke it.
It's like a watch coming apart, just springs and gears and stuff flying everywhere.
Boing. Yeah, you know, we worked with it. We kept working with it. And we figured things out, and we didn't know at the time. See, the intelligent people who knew what they were doing with this stuff, like the brain trust, the Armstrongs, and the coils. We didn't know any of this stuff, so we didn't know to add fuel. You needed to add, So then we came up with our own fuel enrichment circuit that would work in conjunction with that. And eventually the Bobby-Matic actually worked and got us qualified. The Bobby-Matic got us, we put garlets out at Bristol, which was the highlight of my life.
Yeah,
right?
That's cool.
I'm standing on the starting line. Bro, listen to me, right? I'm standing on the starting line, okay, and I'm in shock. I'm like, Richard Langston was driving.
Richard Langston, nice.
Richard Langston was driving Garlitz's car. And Garlis is he's standing in the other lane, and he's like, right? He's making these faces and shit. And I'm standing there, I'm in total shock. I'm like, because our win light is on. And so help me, listen to me, right? The highlight of my life. I will never forget this. I feel an arm come around my shoulder like this, right? And good job, kid. It was the Greek.
That's freaking cool.
He comes over, he puts his arm and says, good job, kid.
That is freaking cool.
I made it.
Yeah.
I don't need to win national events. I had the Greek tell me it was a good job.
That is a freaking moment to remember right there. How cool is that? I mean, that's awesome.
And now I'm a YouTuber. I really, really slow cars.
What a country. What a country.
So, it's hot in here. Hey, Kat, you got the air on? I should think she left me, actually. she has PTSD.
She's cooking you out.
Anytime I start thinking about the Nitro days, she's like,
gone.
Leave me alone. you don't know what that poor thing went through. So back on topic here. What's the last freak that you remember?
I think the local, like for me, there's like local freaks. Like there's this guy named Eddie Sarno. So Eddie's, again, like so many of these guys, has passed away. But Eddie, I didn't know this guy existed until I'm working on a Wednesday at New England Dragway. I'm probably 25, 26 years old. And this dude comes in this rickety, crappy, like looking wooden trailer, and out rolls a freaking motorcycle with a 425 nail head where a motorcycle engine should be. And I'm like, the track manager's like, go do a tech card on this guy. I'm like, oh boy. Long story short, he had run this bike since the 60s, and he traveled with it. He gave me a handbill, which I have in my office at home. His name is Eddie the Savage Sarno. So that was a freak that I didn't know existed that I saw. And that motorcycle's at the New England Museum of Speed now up in New Hampshire. And then another one of the great local freaks was these guys from Connecticut. They're called the Hull Brothers, and their car, they call it the Bomb Squad. It was like a very early Civic, like when they were called CBCCs, like super early Civic with a blown 331 Hemi in the front of it. And sitting up real high on ladder bars and everything. And it wasn't fast, but it was one of my favorite cars of all time, just because it's like, what the hell is going on here? And the real honest answer is I was just at Cletus and Cars 2 weekends ago. I worked with Garrett and those guys calling the stock car race and the drag race. And that's where you want to go. If you want to see the freakiest side of modern drag racing, go to a Cletus and Cars race or an event. I mean, dude, there was a guy there with a freaking boat, an actual.
I mean, like the burnout contest and stuff. Is that what you're talking about?
They run this stuff down the drag strip too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and there's a whole day of drag racing and stuff before the burnout contest is whatever. I think it's kind of entertaining, but it's not really my thing. But like the dudes that run this stuff down the drag strip, I mean, obviously a lot of it's LS swapped and everything else, but like there is so much creativity. Like the young guys today have that same freaking vein in their body that the guys in the 50s had, and the less money they have, the cooler and crazier the thing they make.
Yes. Yeah. That's money destroys everything. It's the broke guys that are just out there. I'm going to get my yayas no matter what, right?
Yeah.
And they come up with the craziest shit, and they're having the most fun. And just getting to the other end is as an accomplishment all to itself. People don't understand how, like, they look at racing and they're like, "Oh, did you win?" Well, oh Jesus! The first thing that you win is getting the car out of the garage or the shop and onto the trailer. Yes. You've won a battle that most people will never fight, and then getting that thing to the track. You've won another battle that most people will never fight. So it's like, and the guys who work off of the bottom understand that. Yeah,
it's one of the things I think is real interesting about Cletus's events is that like people literally just show up to have a good time. It's like one of the few things that I ever go to anymore where there's not like that underlying, which listen, I enjoy it for what I do for a living and everything, but that underlying like tone of like, I'm here to kick some ass. Like the Cletus, if you're coming to like a Cletus deal, I'm not trying to sell this guy anything. I'm just giving you my impressions on it. But like you roll into this place and it's just everybody's on their own program. Everybody's like in the staging lanes, crawling all over everybody's stuff, going, "Oh my God, this is cool, blah, 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 blah." It's like a totally different vibe. And then they're out there just hammering on stuff that it's like, I mean, I think it's like, I got on the radio at one point. I said to one of the guys, I said, "Hey, listen, that guy's made about 4 runs." I said, the 5th one's when the axle's going to come out of the bottom of that thing. Like there's something wrong with the back of that car. Like somebody just needs to go and look at it. But it's just great. Ooh, which zombie? The 65 GTO? Rob Bruce is awesome. We talk about the straight axle 65 car.
Those guys were great. I crewed for them one with the funny car, not that car, but the funny car one time. I don't remember where it was. At the time, I was like crew for hire, so I was just bouncing from car to car to car to car to car. And I worked for them one weekend, man, and they were awesome, just the nicest people. And I did a feature on the 65 car for Superstock and Drag Illustrated.
Didn't he, when he had the flip top car, didn't he like make his own fuel pump?
No, that was Brent Fanning.
Oh, Fanning, yeah.
Brent, right? See, smart guy, right? Working with no money. Okay, he used a washing machine.
The washing machine pump.
As the fuel pump on his fuel car, and that shit ran. It was like making a mockery of because at the time everybody's like the latest Waterman pump, and and it's like people spending thousands of dollars on pumps, and it's like that was like at that time it was like here's your status symbol is the fuel pumps on the front of your motor, and here comes Brent with this freaking washing machine water pump, and he ran with it. If he had a couple of hours, he could have really because he was like any other match racer. He was just going from race to race to race. And he'd pop into a national event and give it a shot, but he didn't have the money to actually see it through. You know what I mean? Like to really step on the parts.
Well, into tying back into our drag racing oddities deal here, the trucks. He and Vicky had the they called them the Thunder trucks. They were like Dodge Dakota funny cars. They were freaking bizarre, but they were a good match race act.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And when he dropped the car, shit.
Oh yeah. That did not go over.
That didn't go over well. He had a great sense of humor, you know. That didn't go well. There were so many guys like that around. My favorite. Do you remember Frank Kramberger?
Okay, so I never met him, but I've seen videos of Frank because Frank burned a car to the ground. The first trip he ever made to the West Coast, he left the East Coast, went all the way to Seattle, and he burned the car to like the frame rails.
That's all he did. That's all he did. Kramberger was amazing. The car was called the Philadelphia Flyer, for you guys who don't know, right? And he was around for, I'm going to say like 3 or 4 years. So it was like the last gasp of East Coast funny car match racing, or just funny car match racing, period. And he was in there with this car called the Philadelphia Flyer. And Kramberger was the most zero fucks given, just send, no matter what. It's on fire, just keep driving it. Didn't matter what was coming off the car. You'd be lined up to run, you know, you're in the staging lanes, you're lined up to run, and you focused on your own car, your own thing, but Kramberger's going to make a pass. So no matter what you do, you drop what you're doing, and you go to the starting line, and you watch, because you don't have to Kramberger makes you pass. You got a half hour to kill. Well, he rebuilt the drag strip. He was great. That was one of my favorites.
Yeah, I think it was, I forget what year it was, but like, you know, in typical kind of Steve Evans style, you watch the video and he's like, and, you know, he sets it up. And it's like, it's always great to see a low budget guy make the trip across the country. And Frank Kramberger, for the first time, has ever headed west. And then it cuts to the shot of the car just completely engulfed in flames. But it didn't go as well as he thought it was going to.
There was a guy named Dean Papadakis.
Oh, yeah, the videographer guy.
Okay, he shot everything all the time. He was always the whole East Coast circuit that we used to run. He was always there. He always filmed these things, but I could never find any of his videos.
Oh, dude, they're all on YouTube. Everything's out there. So all you got to do, look for main event video. Everything he ever shot, he's got it up for free on YouTube.
Really?
One of the single coolest shots ever in drag racing. He has a video called The Thrill. It's about Eddie Hill, and it opens up with this burnout where it looks like you're 1,000 miles away, and Eddie rolls the car up to the point where you're like looking at his eyeballs, and it's a single unbroken shot. It's freaking spectacular. So main event video, Dean Papadakis, watch all this stuff. Yeah,
if you guys, so seriously, if you guys want to know the era that I'm talking about, that I'm referencing here, that's the only place you're going to see it, because this stuff was really obscure. You know what I mean? It was big, but it wasn't on national TV. It wasn't, NHRA, big show, blah, blah, blah. This was a lot of like, independent events and match races and stuff like that. And this guy was all over everything. We used to get pissed off at him because he was very intrusive.
Oh, right? Yeah, well, he invented the idea of those swoopy shots around the car and jamming the camera down the hatch of the. He would do that.
He would jam the camera. Exactly. He'd walk up to the car. You're trying to get everything together, and whoever's driving the damn thing is trying to get his focus together. And here comes Papadakis in the freaking window, going like this with the camera. What's his face? Took a swat at him.
Probably Hoffman.
Tim Gross.
Oh, Tim Gross.
Tim Gross smacked him. Gross had oh God, what body was it? I think it was a Firebird. I don't remember.
The one he ran the headers up through the body?
Yeah, that was neat.
He did it for like 2 races, I think. And so what we're talking about is he has like a 3rd gen Firebird funny car. So rather than having the headers come down and around the body, he ran them up through the top of the body like almost like a tractor puller. And then he put a rubber grommet basically around the bottom of the body it was kind of a ground effects car. The idea was that you're just going to suck the thing down into the ground and kind of use the downforce of the headers. Now, I think 2 things happened. I think it didn't work that great. And the second thing was I think he lost his sponsorship. That's why the whole thing kind of stopped. I think it was at the very tail end of his Skoll deal or something like that.
I thought there was a tech issue with it. That they didn't.
Could have been.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a tech thing. The car worked. I remember watching him. Where was it? He was testing the car. It wasn't booked in. It was a booked-in show we were involved in, but he was there testing that car, and it worked.
It looked cool to me. It looked cool with the body, the sides of the body being smooth, and just the headers just kind of barely tucked out over the top. It was nicely done.
Well, at night it threw the flames straight up.
Oh, that's freaking awesome!
Oh, it was bitching. It was bitching. It must have been fun to drive that car, like just going through the wall of fire like that, you know. The funny car experience and funny car, yeah. That's he had given me a stack of them, the VHSs back when, right? It was I was doing Cars Illustrated magazine by 1987, 1986, and I had all of those tapes, but who remembers? But yeah, if you guys want to see some of the cars that we're talking about, Papa, he videoed one craziest run I've ever seen. Okay, I was working for Caminito, so this was at ATCO. I know you've seen the film of this. Okay, I know you've seen the film of this. So this was at ATCO. It was whatever IHRE national event that we're running at ATCO, and I was with Caminito. We were in the right lane, and I forget who was in the other lane. It doesn't really matter, right? So nighttime, and the shot is from behind the starting line, okay? So you see both cars go, right? And about 200 feet out, the car that's in the left lane catches fire, okay? So now everybody is watching this car, and he's legging it, all right? He probably doesn't realize he's on fire, right? So he's legging this thing, and every eye is on this car. I look over to see where Jerry's at, okay? And then I see this explosion, this just mushroom cloud explosion. And the body goes flying over the scoreboards, okay? So I get out there. It was surreal, okay? So I get to the shutdown area, and there's wreckage as far as you can see, right? Because both cars came apart, as you know. And it's nighttime, and there's wreckage for as far as you can see. And like there's like I see burning car, but there's no driver. Jerry's not in the car. I'm like, where the hell is Jerry, right? And I'm looking around. And is he on the ground? I don't know. And Jerry is standing off on the side of. I can't get back far enough. Jerry's standing there, right, rocking back and forth on his heels like this. Like nothing ever happened. Like nothing ever happened. Go pick up the shit. Jerry was a hard guy to work for. He had a crash in Memphis, right? So
the Memphis crash is insane, and they responded on horseback to that one. If you remember that, yeah.
I wasn't talking, so we had a couple of blowouts, right? Because at the time I had graduated. I had gone from being a helper to actually being a mechanic, and I was actually overseeing cars when I was called to do so, right? So my value had skyrocketed, and I was making decent money. And Jerry stiffed me on a weekend, so I wasn't talking to him, right? So I see this crash, and right away I called Marion, because all of that stuff is water under the bridge. What can I do? So they didn't think he was going to live.
I mean, it's horrendous. You can find it on YouTube. It looks as though like nobody should have survived this. Yeah.
Oh, bro, the car was a Pluger chassis. It was not Pluger. It was a Murph chassis, brand new. Everything was like car had maybe like 10 runs on it at that time. Destroyed. There was absolutely nothing left of it. Every bit of the roll cage, every bit of the cockpit area was kinked and bent, and the rails were missing. He broke one leg in like 22 places, the other leg in like 10 places. He broke like all of his ribs. He broke his arms. He broke like everything was just broken, right? And things were puncturing his lungs, and like just like he was jacked, right? So he was in a coma for a while. So when he was able to start talking, because I've been staying up with Marion, how's he doing, and what can I do? And she says he's talking, right? I said, oh, that's awesome, right? I says, I'll be right over, because he only lived about 20 miles from me. So I go over there, and he's like jacked up, oxygen tank, right? He's sitting in a wheelchair. He's still in like all of these casts and stuff like that. And he's like, we gotta put the fucking car together now, right? So I said, Jerry, whatever you want to do, right? So we started ordering parts. People started donating parts, donating money and everything else. And I put that car together with him. He did it from the wheelchair, but we put the whole car back together again. And within that first year after that accident, he was driving it again.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and then he stiffed me again. I swear to God. We won a race. We won a race in a Milan, I think it was. I don't know, one of the tracks in Michigan. We won this funny car invitational thing, right? And he stiffed me. That's what Jerry does.
Screw me once, shame on you, right? Screw me twice.
You know, you had to be there for a lot of this stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's not a single person, myself included, that's worked in any sort of capacity in this sport that has not been screwed over a handful of times. And like you said, sometimes most guys don't get a second chance. Some guys you think, okay, well this can't possibly happen twice with this same person, and then you're like, wow, I can't believe it happened twice with this same person, and you realize you never work for him again. But yeah, it's 20. I'm 20 some years into this now. There's been more than a couple times where I've been on the wrong end of it. Yeah.
I had this guy named Gary Chamari, right? He owned Gary Chamari. He owned West Hampton Dragway, right?
Oh wow, okay.
So and they had just been doing like bracket cars and stuff like that, right? So we were looking for just to expand the match race market. So I talked him into booking 4 cars in. So it was us with the Twilight Zone car. It was Troy Ray. It was Norm Wilding.
Oh, that's a guy who had another one of the most incredible crashes of all time. 86 North Star Nationals, actually Gator Nationals. Norm Wilding's Gator Nationals crash is effing insane. He gets knocked unconscious. The car goes ripping down the racetrack. Oh, it's brutal. Anyway, sorry.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't remember that.
It was like a comeback for him. He was raced with like around your guys' deal, left the sport for a while, then came back and had this just absolute insane wreck.
See, now when I met him, he had left England and he could never go back. Okay, so now I don't know exactly what he did. Maybe I do, but I don't know exactly what he did. And him and his I don't remember this guy's name, but another Englishman. Their life goal was to come to America and race funny cars. So they did whatever it is that they had to do to get the loot together to come to America, and then they could never ever go back to England.
Wow!
So they were living in the truck. Actually, I think he stayed at my house a time or two, just so you can live like a human for a day. But anyway, so Gary Chamari, he's got West Hampton Dragway. And I get him to book in 4 cars. So it's us with the Twilight Zone. It's Troy Ray, Norm Wilding, and Mike Fazer with the Chicago Fire. Okay.
Okay.
So now rain money is a standard thing, right?
Yep.
Okay. So we had agreed on $350 rain money.
Yeah.
Okay. It rains, right? So we're at the track. The forecast was so we're going to go, right? So we're at the track. We're all set up, and it rains. And, well, we need our rain money now. So the day is over, right? We have to go on our way now. Gary doesn't show up, right? No Gary to pay us, just his manager, right? So allegedly, some of us took him hostage. First, allegedly, we poured gasoline all around the base of the tower. Allegedly, but it was raining, so it really wouldn't have done much good. So allegedly, the next step was to kidnap the manager and take him to a bunch of ATMs because you could only get so much money out of an ATM. And so allegedly, he had to use his mother's ATM card to get us the rain money so he could leave. Allegedly.
Fantastic.
You had to be there. You had to be there. But yeah, Norm Wilding was great. He got a raw deal. There was a guy named Donnie Holbrook down in South Carolina, right? So he was a wheeler dealer, okay? And here's what happened with Wilding. This is what put Wilding out. Norm had a string of bad races, okay, where he kept blowing shit up. There was something with the tune. I don't offhand, I don't know what it was. And he wasn't very talkative about his setup, right? But there was something with the tune, and first part of it, within the first 300 feet, he was hurting his stuff bad. He was hurting it where he was driving a crank out of it. So every time he'd make a run with this, it was crank, block, obviously rods and shit like that, right? all that. So this guy, Donnie Holbrook, who had been buying up racers as they went out of business, right? He was like one of these like liquidation guys.
Yes, the Holbrook Performance Parts. Yeah, I know. Yes.
You know what I'm talking about, right? All right. Well, he put Wilding on a line of credit using his operation as collateral.
Reverse mortgage. Yeah.
Fed him like 5 motors and then repossessed everything. And then Norm went to work in Disneyland. He went to work at Disneyland as an actor in the King Henry's Feast.
Get out of here. Because he had an English accent. That was his qualification.
Yes. So he went from like, pirate or whatever he did in England to like blowing up funny cars to being an actor at a dinner theater in Disneyland.
That is freaking unbelievable.
Yeah, it was a lot of characters, man. A lot of characters.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that believe that the sport was built and is even maintained by a lot of highly upstanding people with a moral compass that is just always pointed due north and never sways from one direction to the next. And I can tell you that is not the case. Yeah, that is not the case.
There's some people who made it with straight up money. You know what I mean? They're very, very straight. But if you go back to the 70s, the glory days of all of this stuff, it was professional drag racing was run, and I know this directly. It was run through chop shops.
Yeah,
and that's the bottom line. These guys were eating Chryslers at an astonishing rate through like the late 60s and into the early to mid 70s, before the aluminum blocks became the thing. And even after the aluminum blocks became the thing, the aluminum heads weren't really a thing yet.
Right. So
there was a need for Hemis, early and late Hemis, and chop shops kept everybody running. So and there was Broadway.
Oh yeah.
My neighbor busted a chop shop and got me. I was like maybe 10 years old, 11 years old, and he knew I was all eat up with drag racing. And he busted a shop in Brooklyn, and he got me Broadway's autograph, Jungle's autograph, and somebody else's autograph. I forget who it was.
Whoa.
Yeah, he busted all of them.
That's freaking unreal.
Yeah.
Yes, would you sign this for a kid? Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Broadway was another one. He's a very interesting character.
Yeah, I mean that's a I did a whole Dorkomotive podcast on him and being able to talk to Harlan Thompson and some of the guys that actually interacted with him. Harlan Thompson tells like a couple of wild stories where because Harlan was real young and he was like the mechanic for Broadway, who was completely inept in every kind of aspect of racing other than he liked to do it. But Harlan Thompson tells a story in the podcast where he's like, yeah, we're driving back to the house, and he says to me, we got to make a stop first. And so he's like, we pull into this restaurant parking lot, and he goes into the trunk and hands me a shotgun and says, if anybody comes out here, just aim this at them and leave. He's like, and then Broadway walks into this restaurant and comes out 5-10 minutes later. God only knows what happened in there, but Thompson said he was like laying down in the seat with this the shotgun barrel kind of like halfway pointing out the window. He said it was, freezers full of cash, just again, all the stuff. It's all there in the Murder Machine book. If you read the book Murder Machine, it's all there in the book, and it's all real, and it's freaking nuts.
I can vouch for the
you were there.
100% of it. I thought I was there. He was before my time. So Freddie got done in 1981.
Okay.
82?
Somewhere in the 80s, yeah.
Right. But I came up in the same circles when I started, because there's that whole East Coast Nitro thing. You know what I mean? So it was all the same people, and you heard all of the same stories. Yeah, and they're all true. Everything that's talked about as far as is true.
Yeah, the pet monkey named Susie, I think, was the name of the monkey, and Al Segrini told the story that Broadway was running a match race at Epping, or he's running one of the funny car shows at Epping, and he does a burnout, backs up, he leaves the starting line, and like 300 feet down the racetrack, he throws the parachute out. And by the time he gets to the 8th mile, the car stopped, and he like pops up through the hatch, and he like throws his hands up, and he had thought he had made a whole run. He didn't realize that it wasn't even like halfway of a run. That's how Uncle Lempstick got it.
Hey, we're all guilty of that. The first run, right? I remember Junior did that when Bobby Logano Jr. did that. First time we put him in the car, he went like 3 feet, and then just like hung the chute, stopped the car, and he was like, "Yeah." And I remember the first time I drove my fuel altered was at AGCO. It was 28 degrees out, right? It was 28 degrees on a Friday night. It was a regular street night, right? But I was like, I got to get this car out, because I had finished it. I finally saved up enough money for Nitro and everything else. I was like, I'm going, right? It was like they were going to close the track, right? It was wintertime, right? So I will never forget that. I did the burnout. The burnout was the easiest thing in the world, right? And then I did like 3 or 4 chirpies after that, because it was like, okay, I got to get my shit together, right? So I did like 3 or 4 chirpies, and I staged the car, and I was like, oh, this is the easiest thing in the world, right? This is nothing, right? The tree comes down, I leg it, and it's like all hell breaks loose, like bam, right? And shit starts moving like this, and you're like, I'm done. It's gotta be the end of the run. I've been driving this car for 15 minutes. I have to be at the end of the track. It takes. Oh, and then I made the biggest mistake in the world, right? Because I figured, yes, I must have finished this thing. Let me take my foot out of it. And then I realized that I was only maybe 200 feet down the track. And I was like, I got to save face, right? I can't just like coast. So I slammed it, which is the worst thing you could ever do, right? If you're going to pedal, you can't do it from the car being right like this it does.
Whoopsie doodle.
Whoopsie doodle. But yeah, the first runs you make in a fuel car, or anything fast, really, but the first runs you make are completely disorienting, because you know that you've gone way past the finish line. It's like you drove this thing out the back door, but you barely cleared the tree.
Gotta ask me, do I remember the burnout truck that had a dragon or bat that would show up to New England Dragway and would do burnouts until the tires would pop? Yes. So this was, one of those typical local acts that you've seen a trillion times at all these different match races, but the track loves it because the guy doesn't want anything other than just to be able to be on the racetrack. They don't have to pay him. He's going to go out there. So it was this weird pickup truck, and the guy's whole program was just to come up here and do a burnout till the tires exploded. But he had this very rudimentary, it was almost like Spinal Tap. And Spinal Tap, when they think they're making an 11-foot tall, 11-foot tall Stonehenge, and it's 11 inches tall. So this guy would come up to start do these burnouts. I do this big build up. Oh, you're going to see a show. He's going to burn the things off. And wait till you see the secret surprise. And the secret surprise was like this freaking dragon or whatever, like the size of a stuffed animal would kind of come out of the bed. But you know how it goes. For downtime, this guy would sit here and the crowd hears 2 tires explode and they would go berserk, and the guy would have his moment of glory. But yeah, no, Larry Smith, I do remember the burnout truck, yes.
So were you there during the Ron Champagne days?
So I worked with his son, Bob, in the tech department, but Ron, I was there when I first started. Larry was running the racetrack up there, so just the guy right after Ron Champagne left was when I started. But Ron Champagne, the legendarily not loved guy at New England Dragway, a guy who treated John Force so badly that John Force was, as we talked about, Matt Race lunatic, would run even when he was coming up in the NHRA ranks. Ron Champagne made him use a payphone to call home in the early 90s. And John looked at him and said, "I will never come back here again." And he held up to his word until the national event in 2014.
Yeah, I booked a bunch of cars in there one time. He stiffed everybody. It was bad. That wasn't a representative number, you know. Yeah, well, but the car smoked the freaking tires and did all of this shit, and the crowd was going, "Wow!" Yeah. And you're going to cut us because it wasn't a representative number. The car still went through the lights under power. They put on a better show than it would have if it went straight down the line, right?
Yeah. No, he's a guy still to this day. If you talk to people that have been around the track a long time, like, you know, I never met the guy in person, but there's not a single person I've ever said, "Man, that was a heck of a guy, that Ron Champagne." Like, every single person has something less than flattering to say.
He was a miserable person.
Yeah.
You know, that's the one thing about drag racing is that everybody's a little touched, but they're all relatively good natured.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because ultimately they live in the dream. You know what I mean? So they're generally good natured. They're, you know, in all different aspects of it. Even if they're crazy, but he wasn't. He was just a dark person. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, absolutely. To the guy that asked if I was into tractors, yes, I think I'm as into tractors as I am into drag racing. It's kind of my weird hang up of things that I like, speaking of obscure oddities. But yeah, I like internationals. I got an old 40s N Series 4 that I bought as a bunch of pieces and put back together using my snowplow at home. I have a flathead V8 to swap into it, like the old funk conversion kits. So yeah, it's an old 8BA flathead that's finally going to head to the machine shop here in the next couple of weeks. So it's good.
Nice. So let's go through here real quick and see if we. So I got a super chat over here. Oh, thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. Let's see. Okay, there's the burnout truck. The Wilding and so Englishtown. Vinny used to pay extra money for burnouts. Right?
Okay.
You do past a half track and you get some extra cash, right? Vinny was great. Vinny, I owe a lot to Vinny now, but he used to pay for half track and better. And Norm Wilding and Brent Fanning, great. This was just the craziest thing. They decided they were going to go for the burnout cash that day, right? So both of them leg it all the way, not past the half track. They go past the lights. The Englishtown had a nice shut-off area. It looks like it's a bummer, a bad shut-off area because what happened with the Connecticut. But past the strike, into the burn, into the shutdown area, they both smoked the tires back there. They disappeared. They fogged the entire track. And I remember standing. I'm not on the start line because we were like the next pair to run, and like there's just smoke. And then here they come. They're backing up. Slow, and these cars were wounded. They were like both of them. They're both pumping oil out of the pipes, and they got back behind the starting line, and it's just like there's no point in continuing.
Yeah.
Shut them down.
Oh, that's great.
There was it was such a crazy time. It was a lot of fun. And this is the main event videos. If you guys want to see some of these cars that we're talking about, go find those main event videos because he was all over these events during this period of time.
Yes, he was.
And did you know that Benny the Bomb died?
Just recently, which is a miraculous kind of situation. But yeah, it was I believe in the last couple of weeks I heard he passed away.
Yeah, he was. I guess he was close to 90.
Yeah, and the guy, the last time I saw him was probably 15 or so years ago. Not I physically had a conversation with him, but one of the funniest things ever was we had booked him in at Epping during one of the match races, and this was back probably let's call it 2004, 2005 era. and he didn't show up. Like just never friggin' showed. Which this guy's a professional. Like this never happened.
Like me.
So Joe Lombardo was running the track at the time, and Joe gets him on the phone, and he says, "Hey, listen, though, there's all these big floods in the Midwest. I couldn't get there. Like I was doing my thing, and I couldn't get to you guys. There's all these floods." So I go, "Okay." Joe tells me the story. So I go home and I go on the internet. It's like, yeah, Joe, he was in Pennsylvania last weekend. There was no flood between here and Pennsylvania. He was trying to say he was trapped out along the Mississippi.
I wonder why he did that.
At that time, I mean, the dude's teeth were all broken. The guy was, I mean, you look into the man's eyes 20 years ago, it looked like he was pretty much checked out. Yeah.
Well, I knew him when he was like at the top of his game, that he was blowing himself up 2-3 times a week. And the way, so the way he would do it, okay, was he had 6 sticks of dynamite in the coffin with him, okay? And they were strategically placed so that when they went off, they would all blow out. So the pressure nothing. He like felt nothing. The pressure would just blow out and it would blow the coffin up, and then he would just get up and everything else. But there was one time they had one of the sticks of dynamite rolled, so it wasn't in the right position. And when it went off, it was near his head. And I was there that night. And he was like, his blood coming out of his ears. He was just like stumbling around. And people thought it was part of the show. They were like, yay! This guy's fucked. Yeah, Benny the Bomb, man. There was the exhibition stuff. See, that's the other thing missing from drag racing today. There was the Leaning Tower of Death, the 60-foot unicycle.
Oh yeah, I mean all that stuff. Yeah. Oh
please, it was. The Brian Carsons used to jump over shit all the time.
Yeah, the sky cycle guy or the kite cycle guy.
Yeah. Bob Carl.
Yep.
Yeah.
So IHRA hired this guy one year called Hot Rod Bobby Cox, and he was like a rodeo clown that had adapted his act to be able to do it on a racetrack. So the way that the act worked, he would go out there during downtime, and the announcer would be like, "Well, what do you think of that, Bobby?" There's like a script to it. So for whatever reason, me and this dude, like right off the jump, hated each other. Like 3 seconds in, it's like, "Oh, I fucking hate you and you fucking hate me." That's how this is going to go. So we're in Norwalk and he's doing his act and he does something and I make a joke and he says, "Step out of the booth, fat boy." All right. So Norwalk's this huge place. So I step out of the booth and he's got this giant slingshot that he's shooting water balloons with. And so he lines me up and he lets this thing go and I'm watching it and it is on a dead line and it's heading straight for me, but I don't think it has the distance. So the thing lands like 3 steps in front of me.
Okay.
And so I go, "Hey, Bobby, if I wanted a kiss, I would have called your mother." Whole place goes friggin' berserk. Fast forward to like 3 months later, we're at Epping for the race in the fall. And Bobby goes out there, starts one of the parts of his act is he would go out there and get on roller skates and do all these kind of tricks. It was the one cool thing he did was the roller skate tricks. So he's out there doing the roller skate tricks, but he's doing it at like half speed. So I get on the PA, I go, "Bobby, pick it up, man." I said, "What?" I said, "Move it." I go, "You call me a fat ass." I said, "Look at you out there. You're embarrassing yourself." Little did I know, the guy was in the middle of having a heart attack. He was performing. He rolls back to the Epping timing tower. He rolls back directly in front of the tower and goes face first into the ground. He ended up, they load him in the ambulance and they speed him out of there. And at the time, I think it was, I forget if Scooter Pico or Aaron Polburn. Aaron Polburn looks at me and says, do you have anything to say for yourself? I said, "I've said all I needed to say." He ended up being okay. But yeah, me and Hot Rod Bobby Cox did not get along.
There was a guy named Hank Edstrom. His last name was Edstrom. I don't remember his first name. He was blind. Okay.
Oh, Mike Edstrom, the blind faith car.
Yeah.
Mike. Yes.
This is it's silly. It's wrong to laugh at this, okay? But you had to be there. You just had to be there, right? So we're at one of the IHRA national events, and they bring out Funny Car, and Brett Kepner is on the mic, and now we're all busy doing our stuff, right? And nobody's paying attention to anything. But Brett Kepner starts going on this whole deal about how the guy who owns this car is blind. And he built this whole car and set it up, and he's blind. So naturally now we're all like, what? Because like, I don't know if you've ever like crewed a fuel car, worked with a fuel car, but it is so intensive. It's crazy, right? And we're like, blind? And so now he's got all our attention, and literally everybody there with a fuel car is now watching this. We're all gathered around on the starting line, and Brett is going on about how he's overcome all these obstacles, and we're all in awe. She's like, wow, this is just amazing. This is so inspirational, right? So they light the car sounds good. Whoever was driving it, I don't know who was driving it, rolls it into the water, hits the throttle, and pukes everything into the water box. just he created the water box. I'm like, anonymously, everybody's like, yep.
Oh, you can't make this stuff up.
You can't make this stuff up.
I'll give you one more before I bail on you. So,
wow, it's over 2 hours, bro.
So, another IHRA national event. I'm probably 22, 23 years old. I'm not going to say the guy's name because he's still a drag racing fan and he's still active and alive.
Okay.
But he was the lead singer of a very popular metal band in the 80s, and he was going to be the grand marshal for our race on that Sunday morning. So they tell me, hey, listen, go get this guy, talk to him, set up, you're going to give him 2-3 questions on the starting line. Just go set up your deal and have it ready to go. So, okay. So I go to the guy's motorhome, knock on the door. I hear this noise that it sounds like a human blob trying to speak. There's no actual words. So I beat on the door again. Same thing. I go, open the door. I go in there. This guy is up 7 ways to Sunday, right? This guy is on shit. I don't know, but he can't even speak. He can barely stand up. So I go back to the tower. I said, hey, this ain't going to work. Like, this guy can't even get his own name out, let alone an interview. So Scooter Pico said, let's poll the fans. So he goes, ask somebody if they drove a convertible. So he said, if you drove a convertible here today, come up to the timing tower. So like 5 or 6 guys came up. This one guy says, oh, I got this Cutlass convertible I drove here. Like, you want to be part of the show this morning? Absolutely. So long story short, me and this guy are in the back of this convertible driving in front of the grandstands. And it's like Weekend at Bernie's. The guy is so effed up, he can't even sit up straight. So I'm holding him up and I'm actually like waving his arm, waving his arm to the fans. The guy's going, this is cool, man. This is cool. Like, I had friggin' drooling on me and everything. But yeah, we basically loaded him back in the motorhome and nobody saw him again. But yeah, it's one thing after the other.
I got a similar story about somebody also who I can't name because he's kind of known, right? We were in Wisconsin at Union Grove. One of the races are for Union Grove, and afterwards we hit a pizza place that was in that area, and this guy was known for pouring them back. Like if you tried to go drink for drink with him, you would die. There's just no way you could a regular human could keep up, right?
So what year was this with Chuck Etchels? I mean, whoever you were.
So we're in this pizzeria, and I order, and he's staggering now, right? He's like, so I stuffed him between. There was like I was kind of lit myself, and I stuffed him between a soda machine and the wall, right? Just kind of like tucked him in there, and he was okay, So I ordered what I wanted. And then I said to this unnamed person, I says, what do you want? And then something happened that I can't imagine how this happened. His bottom lip collapsed. He was so altered that his bottom lip just fell over. I've never seen anything like it. We could tell stories like this, like literally. Yeah. I got like I'm not even scratching the surface.
No.
The years I was involved in this shit.
Go on forever. Like I was at Rockingham one time, walking down the staging lanes, we're getting ready for a pro session with funny cars and everything, and I'm walking down the staging lanes. I'm talking to a driver, and I look over and I said, "That's your truck, right?" The guy said, "Yeah." And it was being repossessed as we were sitting in the staging lanes. The tractor was being towed out of the gate. And I said, "What are you going to do?" He goes, "I haven't paid on that thing in like 8 months. I'm surprised I had it this long." I said, "Okay, well, I guess you knew that."
You know what?
I mean, yeah, freaking crazy.
All right, we're at just 2 hours and 15 minutes now. Brian, tell everybody where they can see your stuff.
Sure. You can check out my YouTube channel. It's with the very creatively named Brian Lohnes YouTube channel.
How did you come up with that?
Yeah. You could check. I know I had a focus group. Went very well. So you can check me out there, and if you'd be so kind, this weekend you can watch the NHRA on FS1. It'll be on Friday tomorrow night, or on Saturday, Sunday, all weekend long, and that's that. And you can check out bankshift.com if you want to read stuff.
Bankshift.com. I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, that's it.
How's Brian Bankshift doing? I haven't talked to him in a long time.
McTaggart's great. He's actually working for Haggerty now and doing a lot of good stuff. He actually, I don't know if you saw that like 76 Charger that he bought. So he's got like a red one. He just put a TKX. He put a stick in it. It's cool as hell.
Nice.
Yeah, it's good.
All right. So, do you have anything interesting coming up on the channel? Not that I mean everything you do is the thing you did on a twin engine IndyCar was epic. I had to watch it twice. Like literally had to watch it twice. The last installment of the Terrifying Tornado. I had to watch it twice.
The next one coming is actually really good. I think it's all. I always think it's another winner coming from. No, who knows? I think it's good. I think you'll enjoy it. I'm going to try to have that out probably midweek when I get home from this race. I'll write the script and stuff. I'm going to tell you what it is, but I don't want to reveal it to the world because I could get ripped off, and I think it's too good an idea to get ripped off.
You got it. All right. So, guys, everybody, thank you for joining us. I'm sorry. We usually try to participate with the audience and give and take. We're going to do this again. Let's wait a few weeks or so. We'll do. And whenever you're ready, you just let me know. I'll do this every night with you. This is great.
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
This is stuff I never talk about on my channel because it's like a secret past. You know what I mean? It's like I you know what I mean? I touch on it every now and then, right? But I try not to. I try to be forward.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, this is great. I'd love to do it again. You bet.
Yeah. So, guys, everybody who joined us, thank you so much. Everybody contributed. Super chat, always appreciated. Mods, I don't even know which one of our mods were there. I feel terrible because I have the greatest mods in the world. I don't know who is here tonight, but Mexican Spec, Fubar, Zero, Ari, guys, thank you so much. Do you ever do lives on your channel?
I haven't yet, but this has been inspiring. So who knows? Yeah.
Hey, I would love to join you.
Oh yeah, no, we could do it. Yeah, absolutely. We'll figure it out.
All right, guys. So that's it.
Week.
I'm gonna pull shoots on this thing. And thank you, man. I greatly appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, it was a blast.
Of course, I'm gonna have PTSD tonight. I'm gonna lay down on my head and oh no, because I swear to God, I did have PTSD. I went for a few years after I walked away from fuel racing. I went for a few years. I was just like I was burnt, bro. I was just like I didn't want to know anything from man or nature or beast or anything. And I was just like. Regroup and then try to fit into regular society, and it was hard. It was really hard.
You know the saying. Some of you guys might not, but nitromethane is the ultimate solvent. It dissolves bank accounts, friendships, marriages, your mental health. Anything it touches, it will dissolve.
All right, I'm ending this. Everybody join us. Thank you so much. This will be up as a regular video. We usually don't post our lives as regular videos, but this one will be up. So if you guys want to catch it on a replay, thank you all for joining us and good night. And